has left Riverrun. He is likely sailing to his lord father in Pike to ask for longships. John announced. Will the squids attack Casterly Rock? Daisy Mormont asked. It could be that Balon Greyjoy allies with us. But it is also possible that he attacks the north. John pointed to the western shores of the north. I doubt they go as far as Bear Island, but the Ironborn could land ships on Sea Dragon Point, or Blazewater Bay. Galbart Glover blanched and Goran Flint's face reddened. Why would Theon turn traitor? Eddard Karstark asked. If it were only Theon, I would be less concerned. But it is his lord father who controls the fleet. Balon Greyjoy saw his castle taken by northern swords. And pirates prey on the weak. The fighting strength of the north is in the Riverlands. Without a hostage, Balon may attack. Why would anyone want Sea Dragon Point? It is just home to otters, seals, and clams. Small Janumber said, conveniently forgetting the Glovers and Deepwood Motte. Before Lord Glover could voice his outrage, John spoke. The Ironborn have held Sea Dragon Point before. They could raid the Stony Shore, or sail the Salt Spear and the Blazeburn inland and threaten more settlements. They could reach Torrens Square. Torrens Square is a strong keep with 30-feet-high walls. The Ironborn know nothing of siegecraft. Darin Hornwood said. The Tall Hearts could shelter in their castle, but then the Greyjoys could raid other areas. Castle Sewin, Barrowton, and Winterfell are close enough. John said. But Winterfell is 200 miles away from Torrens Square. Daisy said. The Golden Tooth is 200 miles away from Riverrun. John said. The Northmen went silent when they realized the import of those words. Lord Snow, my father will be pleased to send men to Winterfell. He can send a dozen barges, packed with knights, war horses, and siege machines. Willis Mandaily said. I thank you, sir. But we will need more men to defend the west. Any attacks must be stopped before the Ironborn capture Deepwood Motte, Torrens Square, or Flint's Finger. I will send 1,000 men to reinforce those areas. Men can march to Seaguard and take ships north. I will send more archers and spearmen to Moat Cailin as well. Galbart Glover and the Flints were heartened, but the Karstarks and Small Janumber were not. Lord Snow, the Lannisters. Torrhen said. Aye, we must face the Lannisters. And there is some chance that Theon convinces the Iron Fleet to look south. But I do not wish to depend on the mercy of Balon Greyjoy. Ned Stark would not allow the north to be ravaged, and my brother Robb would not want the lands of his bannermen in danger. John said forcefully. The northern commanders departed, leaving him alone with Ghost and his thoughts. Robb had 16,000 men when they crossed the neck. 400 had been left to garrison the Twins. Another 100 were at Moat Cailin. 1,000 Mormonts held the Golden Tooth, and 1,000 Glovers, Flints and Sewins were headed north. Even without losing battles, the fighting strength of the north had declined. And the Lannister army loomed. Robb Stark dismounted his horse, favoring his right side. His squire, Oliver, rushed anxiously over, but he preferred to limp than accept help. They had ridden hard the last 2 days and arrived at Grassy Vale on the border shared by the Reach and the Stormlands. Grassfield Keep was called a castle by courtesy, but it was really a fortified watchtower, built of stone, with turrets and arrow slits for defense. Most importantly, there was a Maester there, and Robb dispatched a raven to Riverrun for Jon's eyes. Robb was exhausted, and his legs ached and right shoulder throbbed. When he emerged from the castle, the guards had already watered the horses. There are 2 hours more of light. If we ride now and all day tomorrow, we may be able to. Robb said. Talisa stomped over, hands on her hips. Don't be an idiot. You are pushing yourself too hard. My lady, you cannot speak to the Lord of Winterfell like that. Oliver said, scandalized. Fine. Don't be an idiot, Lord Robb. Talisa said. You were unconscious for 7 days. If you get hurt again, you may not be able to ride at all. My lord, there is an inn close, the Rose and Crown. We could get a hot meal, and the horses could rest in a stable. Bitterbridge is still 200 miles away, and Riverrun even further from Bitterbridge. A few hours will not be of any import. Sir Robar said. I agree, Robb. Better to rest, and keep the horses fresh. Catelyn Stark said. Lord Robb, I could apply a poultice to your shoulder at the Rose and Crown. Don't you need to use your sword arm if you face the Lannisters? Talisa asked. Robb sighed. He had lost this battle. Very well. Let us go to the inn. The inn was a tall timbered building, with the bottom story made of grey stone and the top whitewashed wood. The stables were clean and it rested near a copse of peach and plum trees near the Blueburn River. Above the plain door was a painted sign of a crown with roses on top. Robb wondered if some distant Tyrell cousin had founded the inn. Only Highgarden would put the rose above the throne. A short stout woman emerged from the kitchens to ask their business. Robb handed her a fistful of silver stags and the astonished innkeeper called for the stable boy and serving maid. The draughty common room was quiet as they demolished bowls of venison stew with carrots, peas and onions and roast duck served on brown oat bread drenched with drippings and scraps of cheese. He finished a cold sweet plum before turning his attention to the new recruits. You three were pledged to King Renly. Why change your cloak? Robb asked. Lord Stark, I would have given my life for King Renly, and died happy. Brian said. It was Sir Loras, our commander. He went mad. He tried to kill all of us, swearing that we must have helped the murderer. We were too shocked to fight back. Robar said. Sir Loras thought that both you and Renly were dead. But that great wolf of yours growled, and his sister Queen Margaery calmed him down. Imman said. Even so, Loras still thought that we had conspired against the king. He wanted to hang all of us that night, but your Lady Mother spoke for us. Robar said. We were fortunate that Lady Olenna was there. She told Loras that a trial was needed. They waited until Lord Mace arrived. Else Lucas and Oliver would have hung. Catelyn said. Robb shook his head. Somehow he doubted the wisdom of Mace Tyrell. Had the Tyrells killed his squire and Sir Lucas, any hope of an alliance would be gone. War, and the fates of tens of thousands, could turn on very little. He grimaced when the hot poultice touched his right arm. Lord Stark, was the ghost truly Stannis? Brian asked. I saw his features in the shadow, the eyes, the brow and the chin, but as to how such vile magic was performed, I do not know. But I would swear it was his face. Robb said. Then I vow to avenge King Renly. One day, I will meet Stannis in battle. Brian swore. Renly is not dead. He may still recover. But we are going north to fight the Lannisters. I do not know if we will face Stannis in battle. Robb cautioned. Lord Stark, we would pledge our swords. Without your words, we may have lost our lives. Robar said. Sir Imman Q also nodded, and the two drew their swords out. Brian of Tarth hesitated. My lord, I am not certain that I can. If you should fall in battle, I would need to serve Jon Snow in battle. And why would that be a problem? Robb asked. Lord Stark, they say that your brother fell upon Sir Stafford Lannister and butchered thousands of men when they slept. Brian said. And why would that be a problem? Robb repeated. But, such action is not fitting of a knight. It is not noble or just. Brian said. This is war, not a song of gallant knights and fair maidens. I did the same at Riverrun. After capturing the Kingslayer, I rode hard for Riverrun in the hour of the wolf. There are thousands of Lannister men north of the Tumblestone. Most were asleep in their tents when we attacked. Better that my enemies die butchered in their sleep than my men die fighting. Robb said. Lord Stark, I do not know if I can follow such an order. I wish to be a true knight, and protect the weak, and fight for justice. Brian said with an innocence that Robb's men did not share. My lady, war is not a tourney, or a game. You may think my brother seems hard and cruel, but his actions are for the north and to gain justice for my lord father. You must follow orders in war, because discipline is the soul of the army. Robb said those words kindly, but Brian looked uncertain. Perhaps, the Brian could pledge her sword to me. Stannis has a great army around him and many guards. Lady Catelyn said. Do not throw your life away. Brian brightened. If that would be acceptable to Lord Stark. Very well. Robb nodded. He accepted Robar and Daemon into his service and promised them a place at his home and at his table. Lady Catelyn extended the same vow to Brian of Tarth. She was a skilled warrior, and his mother would need a guard at Riverrun and during battles. Perhaps Robb should have insisted that the oath of fealty be given to House Stark. Still, what trouble could Brian make, if she pledged her sword to his lady mother? Tyrion hurried forward when he heard the sounds of laughter ahead. He passed a dying calico cat, bleeding profusely from a crossbow bolt, and swept into the lower bailey, with Bronn and a dozen mountain clansmen trailing. The crowd of sycophants parted before the heavily armed guard. A portly knight was sprawled on the ground carrying a melon on a stick. Tyrion arrived to see a fat ugly bald man in white armor hitting Sansa Stark with the flat of his blade. The girl, her dress torn down to the waist, cried in pain and the crowd sniggered at the sight. "What is the meaning of this?" Tyrion yelled. At the center of the great room, Joffrey stood, flanked by Lancel Lannister and the odious Meryn Trant. A crossbow hung on Joffrey's belt. Sir Meryn and Sir Boros Blount, Sansa's tormentor, sneered at Tyrion. "What sort of knight beats helpless maids? A knight who follows the orders of his king." Meryn retorted. "I am punishing her for the crimes of the Starks," Joffrey announced. "She has nothing to do with the battles. The young wolf captured Sir Jaime. And the white wolf took the golden tooth. If they were here, you would not be punishing anyone," Tyrion said. Bronn and the guards fanned out, hands on their weapons as they stared down Joffrey's guards. Two huge mountain clansmen stepped forward and Sandor Clegane took advantage of the confusion to offer Sansa a dark cloak. "Imp, the king gave orders to punish the girl. And you cannot threaten the king," Meryn said, stepping forward to grab Sansa. Sir Boros lifted his sword to strike Sansa's thighs. Tyrion smiled. "I cannot hurt the king. His men, however, have no such protection." Shagger, a massive hairy clansman with an overpowering stench, slammed the back of a hand-axe into Sir Boros' rotund belly. Even protected by plate mail, the king's guard keeled over in pain. Shagger then clubbed the head with a dirty left fist, and Boros fell splat on the ground, his armor clanging loudly. Bronn had already placed the tip of a longsword at Sir Meryn's neck. Kings cannot be beaten. But whipping boys can be. Gaemon Palair was punished for Aegon the Unhappy's sins before he died from poison as his food tester. Are there any volunteers to be his grace's whipping boy? Care to fill that role, Sir Meryn? Tyrion asked. Sansa is mine, and I can torment her how I like. Joffrey sulked. Sansa is your betrothed. And if you care nothing about that, she is our only hostage. Since you killed the most valuable one. If you hadn't chopped off Ned Stark's head, this war would have ended with a negotiation. Your uncle, Sir Jaime, and Lancel's father, Sir Kevan, would be free. As Hand of the King, I am taking charge of Lady Sansa. Tyrion said. A short hideous woman darted out and took Sansa's hand. Even without her scarred bony face and the double necklace of human ears, Chella of the Black Ears would have been ugly. The clansmen were too savage to have any fear of Sir Meryn or Joffrey. Tyrion turned to leave. I am the king. The king can do as he likes. I can punish anyone I wish in the Seven Kingdoms. Joffrey yelled. Tyrion could not hold his tongue at his nephew's petulance. Tell that to my lord father. Or Robb Stark or Jon Snow. I doubt that any of the three will tremble at your words. Tyrion and his entourage escorted the dazed Sansa back to the Tower of the Hand. The battlements, halls and doors of the tower bristled with hundreds of sellswords and even more clansmen. The mercenaries followed Bronn while the mountain men looked to Shagger, Tymet and Chella. Servant women and a ginger-haired maester rushed to attend the girl's bruises and wounds. They took her away to the bedroom wing. Lady Sansa will stay here for her safety. She is not to leave the tower for any reason. Tyrion said to the many sets of guards in the room. Bronn nodded. Good, we need her as a hostage if the Northmen attack King's Landing. Tyrion scoffed. The Northern army is 500 miles away. And they have my father and the Lannister army to contend with. Didn't save the people at the Tooth. That was 200 miles away and well defended. Bronn said. The sellswords in the room nodded in agreement. Shagger, son of Dolf, does not fear this Jon Snow. Wolfman will face my axes. The giant hairy warrior kissed the crescent blades of the black steel battle axes. Tyrion doubted that was sanitary. Then again, Shagger's lips were also filthy. You can face him first. After he captures your men, he will chop off their hands, feet, ears and cocks. He might feed them to you and not the goats. Bronn japed. I don't have no cock. Chella crowed. Tyrion shuddered. He certainly didn't plan to investigate that statement. The bloody wolf will find something else to chop off. Bronn said to the suddenly thoughtful mountain men and women. Tyrion shook his head. He had no time for this. He had a meeting of the small council soon. The afternoon light passed through the 3 large arched windows of the private audience chamber. The solar was not as large as the royal chamber but well furnished with wall hangings, wax candles, and Mirish rugs. An Isozi water clock, with water dripping down a shallow metal cylinder, measured the time, and a golden stag and lion would emerge on each hour. Tyrion stopped writing the letter to Doran Martell, the Prince of Dawn. One of the 3 seated at the long cherry table was likely a spy for his sister Cersei. The small council was down to 3 members besides the Hand. Jaime, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, was imprisoned at Riverrun. Stannis and Renly, the Master of Ships and Laws respectively, had rebelled against the Iron Throne. Tyrion would have gladly filled those posts but Stannis had taken the Royal Navy and none of the other regions cared about the King's laws. Tyrion waddled over to his seat to join Grand Maester Pycelle, Lord Varys and Lord Baelish. Bronn watched his back, and 24 more guards stood near with weapons ready. The trays of grapes, pecans, cheese and crackers were untouched. Varys and Baelish drank mint tea while Pycelle had a cup of iced honey milk. Tyrion poured himself a large goblet of Dornish red and heard a loud commotion as a woman ordered his men to step aside. My sweet sister, he thought, and quaffed the wine. Where is that red-haired tart? Joffrey says that you took her from Maegor's Holdfast. Cersei demanded. 4 knights in gold plate armor entered the room with his sister. The Lady Sansa is here in the Tower of the Hand. Your son ordered his Kingsguard to beat her bloody in front of the entire court. Tyrion replied. Joffrey is only angry about Oxcross and the Tooth. He would not harm her too much. I told him that he should put a babe into her belly. Cersei said. Tyrion almost spat out his wine. Lady Sansa has not yet flowered. And they are betrothed, not married. What good would a bastard do for the throne, he said. Joffrey can legitimize a bastard. The throne can claim the north through the babe. If father kills Robb Stark, then Sansa's child inherits Winterfell. Cersei said with a smile. The plot was ambitious, rash, and likely to blow up badly. A Stark child with Joffrey as father had a very good claim to the Iron Throne. The North would never accept Joffrey's bastard as warden but they might push for that babe to become the king. But then again, his sister never thought of such things. Lady Sansa is our only hostage. As Hand, I refuse to let her be harmed. We may need her for any negotiation with the North. Tyrion said. And what negotiation will that be? Will it occur before or after the wolves clash with Lord Tywin's army in the Riverlands? Petyr Baelish said with a mocking grin. Varys giggled. Men say that Jon Snow will not even need to attack the Lannisters. That he marches south to sack King's Landing, while Lord Tywin licks his wounds back west. Varys flapped his hands like the wings of a fat, bald and perfumed bird. The puppeteers dub him the Winged Wolf. I had not known a man could be part wolf, part raven, and all sorcerer. They say he will bewitch the guards to open the gates, and bathe the city in blood. I want those puppet players killed and their heads on spikes. And the audience to be blinded in one eye. How dare they spread these traitorous tales? Cersei fumed. If you punish people for speaking and watching, these absurd stories will spread further. King's Landing has no army that can take the field. Father must deal with the Starks, not us. Lord Varys, do you have anything useful to tell us? Tyrion said. 1,000 pardons, Lord Hand. I thought you wished to know the chatter among the common folk in King's Landing. The eunuch did not look sorry at all, but turned more serious. My little birds spread odd tales about the Reach and the Stormlands. The Baratheon brothers had a parley with the young wolf attending. Somehow, both Renly and Stannis injured each other, and Robb Stark returned north. Was the Stark boy involved in this altercation? Perhaps we can use this to drive a wedge between the north and the other kingdoms. Baelish said. My birds say that Robb Stark was hurt, but after a week, rose like a vengeful dire wolf. He accuses Stannis of attempted kinslaying, and claims that the Red Witch conjured a shadow with Stannis's face to kill his brother. They say that the young wolf saved Renly's life at great risk to his own. They call Robb Stark a hero in the south. Varys concluded. He gritted his teeth at the terrible news. If the wolves got the swords of the Reach or the Stormlands, they could track Tywin in the Riverlands. The fall of King's Landing would be certain after the Lannister army was destroyed. But what of the Baratheon brothers? Will they march for the capital? And which lords support them? Tyrion said. Varys tittered, the rolls of fat on his neck quivering. That is very amusing. The Tyrell army is frozen because they must wait for their king to wake from his wounds. They cannot march and lose men by the day. Stannis is recovered, but no one wants to serve a kinslayer, and Renly was popular with the Stormlanders. Only few houses have gone over, Florent, Faring, Meadows and Hope. Stannis may have a few thousand more men, but due to Robb Stark's words, House Caron, Tarth, Lunmouth and Selmy have sworn not to serve a kinslayer. Varys said. Tyrion released his breath, happy for the good news. 10,000 men were insufficient to storm King's Landing. Between gold cloaks, guards, sellswords and clansmen, nearly 6,000 soldiers defended the city walls. Stannis does not have the men. But if Renly wakes, or allies with the north, we will be in dire straits. Tyrion poured a goblet of wine for Cersei. Renly shows no signs of waking. But that was 2 days ago at Bitterbridge. And I do not know if the Reach offered any swords to the Starks. Varys simpered. Lord Hand, perhaps I should go south as an envoy. I have done business with Tyrells before. I could go and sound them out. Renly may recant, and pledge his fealty to his royal nephew for his brother's head. And I am too unimportant to make a hostage. Baelish said. Tyrion did not trust the unctuous Baelish. The Mockingbird was playing a deeper game, and many lords underestimated the Master of Coin as an up-humped merchant. That said, the throne needed any allies they could get. After all, he was offering Myrcella to buy off the Martells. Tyrion hid his face with the silver goblet. If Baelish was out of King's Landing, he could send Bronn and Podrick to inspect the brothels and uncover any secrets. Baelish's men would be easier to interrogate if their paymaster was 300 miles away. Very well, Lord Baelish. The Crown thanks you for your loyalty. If you convince the Tyrells to support King Joffrey, you will be handsomely rewarded. Everyone in the small council smiled, and pretended to be friends. They all had their secret plots, Tyrion thought. He hoped that none of them involved killing the Hand. He finished the wine and reached for another bottle of wine. The letter to Dawn could wait. The Tyrells assembled at Bitterbridge, the mood somber. Tents, banners, wagons, and siege machines littered the Rose Road, but this time, there were no jugglers, mummers or singers. Renly had been placed in the Lord Caswell's bedchamber, watched over by a team of maesters. Willis and Garland sat with Margaery as Lady Olenna eyed her son with annoyance. An elegant lady with long silver hair returned to the solar. Mother, have the maesters seen any change? Margaery asked. Lady Aeleri shook her head. Archmaester Ibros says he cannot detect any response. He doubts that King Renly will wake up soon. Loras is inconsolable. The Tyrells absorbed the news with a collective groan. I should have come to the parley. If I led King Renly's van, Stannis might have fled the field. And now, Randil Tarly refuses to march. Mace complained. Lord Tarly has the right of it. Willers said. Without Renly, Highgarden has no claim to the Iron Throne. And men will not wage war without a king who can grant titles and lands. What happens if Renly dies? Garland asked. Loras will be besides himself. Besides sleep, he has not left Renly's side for days. Aeleri said. Mother, Garland is asking for House Tyrell. We have declared against the Lannisters. What side will we take if my husband passes? Margaery said, looking to Olenna. The Queen of Thorns snorted. We cannot ally with Stannis. Loras wants to kill him, and more importantly, he may favor his Florent relatives. And as for the Lannisters, our spies say Joffrey is a cruel boy who ordered the King's Guard to beat his betrothed. What about the wolves? Why not curry favor with the Starks? Garland asked. Robb Stark may have been lucky. But a callow boy cannot defeat Tywin Lannister. Mace declared. I was at Riverrun. The Northmen worship the young wolf. And the White Wolf is feared. Lord Tywin does have more knights, cavalry and men, but the North controls several castles standing in his path. Going west will not be easy for the Lannister army. Garland said. The Starks have one weakness. Willers said. They have no strong allies. Lord Eddard Stark had 5 true-born children and a bastard, but he crafted no true marriage bonds. He married his oldest daughter to Joffrey. And the Starks have strong ties to the Riverlands and the Vale. Garland argued. Yes, but none of that helps. They are at war with Joffrey. The Riverlands are divided, as usual. And the Vale is silent. Lysa Arryn may have been a Tully, but she refuses to send any of her knights. The Starks need betrothals that give them swords. Willers said. What are you thinking, Willers? Margaery asked. You have an entire horde of companions and ladies in waiting. One of them could be a match with Snow. If the North falls, a betrothal with the bastard would hardly matter. But if the wolves win, then we might have a foot in the Stark camp. Willers said. Margaery wrinkled her nose. I have ladies in waiting, but they are married. Lady Leonette is Garland's wife, and Lady Graceford carries a child. A few others are betrothed, and Aelia, Mega, and Alysanne are years from flowering. Perhaps we should ask our bannermen. They may have daughters to spare. Willers said. Very well. Garland, please go find them. Olenna ordered. Sir Garland returned minutes later, with Jon Fossoway, Mathis Rowan and Baelor Hightower. Owen Fossoway had come when he heard Snow's name mentioned. Willers informed the 3 lords of their thoughts. Baelor spoke first. Elaine has told me much of this Jon Snow. If he were granted lands, I would not object. But there are no female Hightowers of age. Randil Tarly has 3 daughters. Talar Tarly is 10 and 5. Jon Fossoway noted. Lord Tarly would stab himself with his sword Heartspan, then marry his daughter to a bastard. Olenna said. If we suggested that, he would likely challenge you to a duel. What about bastards? Surely there are a few flowers that are lying about that would be happy to marry another bastard. We can give him Standfast in North March. Mace said. There is Ophelia Flowers. She is Humphrey Hewitt's bastard. Lord Hewitt has many daughters, and Ophelia is said to be buxom. Mathis Rowan said. Perfect. We will propose a betrothal with her to this Jon Snow. Mace said. Owen Fossoway's face turned red. Ophelia Flowers is an empty-headed twit. Offering her to Jon Snow would be an insult. Mace Tyrell blinked at such effrontery from a 4th son. Before he could retort, Garland responded. Owen, you know Snow well. Who do you think is the proper match? Owen ignored the look of caution from Jon Fossoway. You should offer her. To the shock of many in the room, he pointed to Margaery Tyrell. That is outrageous. If your father was not present, you would be in chains. Mace roared. I am married to the king. Margaery said with insulted pride. Who is likely to die or stay in a coma? Archmaester Ibros is unmatched as a healer, but he can do nothing. My lady, Jon Snow would make you a good husband. Owen said. Owen, your friendship, while admirable, has blinded you. Snow is not some gallant hero without flaws. Willers said. Owen directed his gaze at the air. Jon Snow is not a hero. And I know his flaws well. He is not lovable. He is headstrong and obstinate. Sometimes at the Citadel, he was deemed proud or insolent. But he is cunning, brave and loyal. Do you want a man to eat lemon cakes and sip tea? Or do you want someone who can beat your enemies? Bah, in all likelihood, the Starks will lose to Lord Tywin. So this is pointless. My daughter will never marry a bastard. Mace blustered. Jon Snow has no lands or titles. So cleverness aside, the hand of my granddaughter is far too great a prize. Olenna said. His brother is Lord of Winterfell. And he has proven his worth in battle. If he married Margaery, he would make Highgarden strong. Owen said. The appeal to the Tyrells fell flat. They focused not on their family lands, but on the Iron Throne. I am not the Rose of Highgarden. I am a queen. I wish to stay a queen, and rule over the 7 kingdoms. Margaery said, ending the discussion. The chastised Fossoes left, as did Lord Rowan and a thoughtful Baelor Hightower. In the Solar, Mace railed against green boys who thought better than wiser, more experienced elders. The Queen of Thrones agreed wholeheartedly, staring at her oblivious son. All thoughts of a marriage offer were forgotten in the ensuing rant, and the trays of lemon tarts and honey fingers. Jon had no idea that his marriage prospects were discussed 400 miles away. He was focused on more immediate matters. Hoster Blackwood fed corn to the dozen ravens that had arrived that morning. Letters from Deepwood Motte, Torrens Square, White Harbour, and Winterfell detailed their preparations for possible raids. Lady Mage sent news from the Golden Tooth, listing food and supplies delivered by the Westermen. There were messages from Acorn Hall, Stonehenge, and Wayfarer's Rest. Small bands of Lannisters had been detected but not the entire host. The last letter was dispatched by his brother from Stony September, less than 200 miles away. In 3 or 4 days, Robb would return to Riverrun. Jon paced back and forth, looking east over the red and muddy waters of the Trident. Lord Tywine had not attacked in force yet. The Old Lion had sent scouts to probe defenses. Some were captured, others driven back to Harrenhal. Rivermen patrolled all crossings of the Trident north and south of Riverrun. More importantly, they had orders to dispatch messengers on fresh horses and find castles with ravens if there was any sign of the larger Lannister army. It took time to muster a host of 20,000 men. The lands around Harrenhal were vast and fertile, so the Westermen might have been pillaging one final time for forage. But it had been several weeks already since Oxcross, and still Lord Tywine had not marched. Jon thought it was an odd blunder. The north had the high ground and the castles. With the fall of the Tooth, Riverrun was well supplied. Every day that Tywine waited, he gave the north and Rivermen more time to prepare. He walked out into the courtyard, warm from the belches of the blast furnace. Large barbed steel bolt heads, over a foot long, hissed as they cooled in water. Small folk were sanding and polishing steel caps and gears. Other soldiers laid out large wooden beams and ropes, and the Winter Town boys were assembling machines in front of gawking bystanders. Lord Snow, what are those things? Smalljan scratched his head. On a flat wooden platform, a wooden stand, reinforced with iron, held what seemed to be half of a giant's crossbow. But the weapon did not look complete. 2 steel capstans on either side were connected to tightly wound ropes. An arched strut sat at the front to allow the operator to target, and the whole machine used a light but stout steel frame. I call this a Carrow ballista. We will use them in the battle to come, Jon said. A crowd had gathered, as the Karstark boys, the Hornwoods, Smalljan, and Dacey watched the Wintertown boys work on adjusting the steel frames. I have seen ballista before, but aren't these a bit small? Eddard asked. The bed of the weapon was waist-high, and the entire device was 4 feet wide. Aye, but that is why we use steel. If you replace wood with metal, the ballista can be smaller, lighter, and more powerful. He pointed to the giant wooden shafts. Only 3 men are needed to load and shoot 1 bolt. The Smalljan hefted up a finished bolt. The missile was nearly his height, and the Smalljan was not small. Both of his hands wrapped about the thick bolt. This must weigh 30 pounds. Even I, catapult umber, would not be able to throw it 100 feet. Jon doubted that any man could throw a 6-foot bolt 50 feet. It is a ballista, not a catapult. And it is much stronger than any crossbow. You turn the metal windlass to twist the torsion springs, and that force in the ropes propels the missile. Snow. The shaft is 6 feet long and the metal barb is several inches wide. Why does the bolt need to be so massive? You can kill a knight with much less. Dacey asked. The Carrow ballista is not designed to kill knights. And the Lannisters will be the first to see it in battle, Jon said. It will be a gift from the north for Lord Tywine. 2 days later, Jon summoned the other commanders back to Riverrun. Roose Bolton and Rickard Karstark marched back on the river road. Great Jon Umber rejoined the Small Jon with Glover and Hornwood men. The Blackfish stayed east, ranging to oversee the scouts. He had sent Martin Rivers and Titos Blackwood to report. Edmure Tully had called his banners, and John Osbracken, Leman Diari, Jason Mallister, Cale Vance, and Clement Piper sat next to their liege lord. Lady Smallwood represented Acorn Hall, and she stayed next to Lady Went, and a few other noble wives. Pockets of phrase were scattered through the great hall. The Marndaly brothers, Eddard Karstark, Daisy Mormont, and Small Jon Umber had stayed at Riverrun after returning from the Golden Tooth. Martin Rivers rose up to speak. He was a bastard son of Lord Walderfrey, but with a ruddy face and a broad build unlike his pale-faced relatives. The Blackfish considered Martin a talented scout, and he led a dozen outriders near Harrenhal. We have only seen sellswords going south to the God's Eye. The numbers are small, so likely to be foragers. The heavy cavalry has begun to move. There are small bands of men west and north. And their wagons. Have the Lannisters begun to transport their supplies? Jon asked. There are lots of wagons, horses and mules being packed and loaded. But they have yet to move. Martin said, scratching his beard. Roose Bolton spoke in a soft whisper. I believe we should attack. The Lannisters will be exposed on the fields and farms outside Harrenhal. If we march through the night, we may be able to surprise their forces and scatter their cavalry. No. Jon said. Robb will be here in a day's time. And Tywine Lannister needs to come to us. Let the Lannister march and be exhausted before the battle. Do you plan to hide behind castle walls? Rickard Karstark sneered. Jon refused to be baited. Tywine Lannister wants to return west. He has 3 choices. The army can go south on the Gold Road. But we know that Renly has 70,000 men at Bitterbridge. If he attacks from the south, the Lions would be destroyed. Lord Tywine can also go directly west. But we have a ring of castles, Acorn Hall, Pink Maiden, Atranta. We would see the Lannister forces from a distance, and to be safe, he would need to take the castles. Lord Tully, where else can the Lannisters cross the Red Fork? I have posted men at every crossing north and south of Riverrun. They have orders that if they see an enemy army, to destroy the bridges, and make them impassable for wagons. There are places though where the river can be forded. The Red Fork is not as deep or fast as the Tumblestone. There is a mill half the distance to Pink Maiden, where crossing would be easy. Edmure said. What of the areas upstream here? To the east and north? Jon asked. My men and the Blackwoods guard some of the crossings. But Lords know, the easiest place to cross the Trident is at the junction. A few miles from where the rivers meet, there are many bridges and the water is shallow. Jason Mallister said. You don't mean the Ruby Ford? Jon asked. That was where Rhaegar Targaryen had died in battle with Robert Baratheon. The Ruby Ford is too far east. But just a mile west of Three River Point, the Red Fork can be passed. Lord Shawnee held those lands before he was attainted for supporting the Black Fires. Titos Blackwood said. But what of the Blue Fork? Is that also passable near there? Jon asked. It can be. But thanks to the heavy rains, the Blue Fork is flooding its banks, and the rising waters have washed out the bridges from Ramsford to the Fair Market. You would have to go far north, nearly 100 miles to Old Stones, past Blackwood Hall. Titos said. We will not hide behind walls, Lord Karstark. We will attack the Lannisters when they cross the Trident. That will be when their forces are the most vulnerable. Whether they go west or north, we will give battle when their horse and wagons need to ford the river. Jon said. That is sensible. The west bank of the Trident is higher than the east and wooded. We can have archers hidden in the forests. Edmure said. We will crush them, like Harryon and Torren did at the Broken Bridge. Small Jon cried. He was eager to show the Karstark brothers that the Umbers were the true warriors of the north. The Small Jon also could care less what the Freys thought. This battle will not be so easy. Jon warned. In the encounters so far, we have had the element of surprise. there will be none here. And Lord Tywine has spent years building up his forces. Lannister men wear heavy steel armor, carry the best weapons that Casterly Rock can make, and ride well-trained destriers. We will win. The young wolves are unbeaten in the field. Daisy said with a crooked smile. Jon did not share her sentiments. Oxcross and the Tooth had given the North great confidence. But Tywine Lannister was not a dolt like Sir Stafford. He sat with Chet, Clydas, and the other Wintertown boys, speaking about the different methods of fortifications. They looked over the journals that Jon had written at the Citadel, and the pictures of trenches, siege towers, and earthworks. Jon dismissed the crew when he heard a tentative knock at the door. "What is it, Geryon?" Jon asked the hesitant boy. "It is the prisoners. One of the Lannisters has asked for you," Jerry said in an uncertain voice. "Very well. I am done for the night," he said. Ghost accompanied him to the Maiden Vault. The Mormont soldiers had been replaced with a mixture of Winterfell and Tully men. The Stark men wore silver mail, steel caps, and a white tabard decorated with a grey dire wolf. The Tully guards had helms with fish crests and wide-bladed spears. The short square keep was quite crowded now, and all the rooms were full. Jon had emptied most of the dungeons, seeing no need to keep low-born prisoners. After the capture of the Golden Tooth, the common soldiers were even more eager to agree to a ransom. The high-born prisoners had swelled in number. Jon waited near the fire. It was twilight and the pinkish glow of the sky was fading. The short stub of a candle dripped wax on the oak table. The Stark guards brought a big blond man into the room. Sir Kevan sat down on the other side, his face a deep grimace. Jon bade the guards to leave. Ghost was more than enough to defend him against a weaponless Lannister. He waited for the man to begin. "Snow, you have filled up this keep with squires and captives." Kevan began. "Aye, it is a new Casterly Rock. More Lannisters here than the Westerlands." Jon said. "My lady wife does not belong here. And Janie should be elsewhere." Kevan said. "Have they been treated poorly, sir?" "I have made it clear to Lord Tully that prisoners are not to be harmed or insulted." Jon said. "No. The guards have been respectful, and kind to Janie. But my wife was the only lady you took, and I would ask that she and my daughter be returned to the Golden Tooth." Jon had underestimated Sir Kevan. "You have heard of my vows at the Tooth. Martin told me. He said you swore that when the war ended, the prisoners will be returned safe and sound. You made no such oath at Riverrun. I believe that you value the honor of House Stark. My wife does not deserve to fear for her life." Kevan said. "True, Lady Dorna does not deserve that. But many people do not deserve their fate." Jon said. "She is innocent. And my daughter has 3 name days." Kevan said. "Rhaenys was murdered when she had 3 name days," Jon thought. "She was also a child, caught up in a bloody war. Why should I even hear your request, sir? Why should I care?" Kevan marshaled his arguments. "I am not without influence. I have several hundred knights, and the ear of my brother. My counsel carries weight at Casterly Rock and King's Landing." Jon snorted. "Please. If Tywine Lannister could take my head, you would not stop him. You could not stop him. You are duty-bound to your house, and they are no friend of the Starks. It is true that my brother wants you dead. But wars do not last forever. It is possible that the wolves and lions fight to the last drop of blood, but also possible that both houses survive. The Starks and Lannisters have lasted thousands of years. I would not betray my family, but if I could do your sisters a kindness, or speak for peace in the future, I would. I cannot speak for Tywine, but I would forego revenge. These are not small things." Kevan said. Jon considered the offer. Sir Kevan wanted to keep his wife and daughter safe. He had not asked anything for his sons or himself. "I do not doubt your words, sir, but I will make no decision before the battle. If I grant this request, it will not be because I feared your brother." "What if you die in the upcoming battle?" Kevan asked. "Pray that I live then." Jon jested and then turned serious. "I do not wish harm on Lady Dorna or your daughter. You have my word." And the Starks have always held that an oath will pursue an oath-keeper and oath-breaker to the world's end. Jon ate a simple lunch, taking care that the meat juices did not drip on the parchment. He had no desire to partake in a meal with the many lords and commanders. At his request, the kitchen had placed hot roast beef in onion gravy between 2 thick slices of wheat bread. It was a fine meal washed down with watered-down ale. Harrenhal was closer to the junction of the Trident than Riverrun, but the Northmen had a huge advantage. They could use the river road that ran all the way from Casterly Rock to Riverrun and finally ended at the Inn of the Crossroads. The Lannisters would have to march over forests and hills. Even at a tiring pace, it would take the infantry over a week to move 100 miles. Plus, much of the northern forces were already further east. Bolton, Carstark, and Bracken infantry were 3 days' forced march from Three Rivers Point, and Vance and Mallister soldiers patrolled nearby crossings. As soon as the Outriders spotted the Lannister advance, the northern army would move to intercept. Jon heard the sound of cheers in the distance. He walked into the Black Raven. A dozen horses were riding from the south, led by a strong young man with thick brown hair, and a heavy fur coat draped over his back. A lean dire wolf with grey smoke fur ran by his side, nearly as large as the white courser. Robb Stark and Grey Wind had returned to Riverrun. Jon stood outside with Dacey Mormont and other members of the battle guard. Small folk, soldiers and lords waited eagerly in the courtyard and at the windows. Robb grinned and then grimaced slightly when he dismounted. Grey Wind greeted Ghost with a loud snort, and the 2 dire wolves raced off to the Godswood. Robb's guards had returned with Lady Catelyn, but there were 4 others, 2 men and 2 women. 3 wore plate mail of different colors, red, yellow and blue. The other woman was garbed in simple grey robes. Lord Stark. The army is yours. Jon said with a bow. Thanks, Snow. Robb said. He turned to the crowd assembled in the yard. My lords, knights, and soldiers, even in the Stormlands, they tell of the great victories at Oxcross and the Golden Tooth. Now it is time for the final battle in the Riverlands. Together we will defeat the Lannister forces and bring Lord Tywine to justice. The cheers lasted for a long time. Jon waited until the men thinned away, and only a few of the battle guard remained. Finally, they made it to the Great Hall, where servants rushed to place half a dozen dishes on the long table. Jon noted with dismay that they did not serve Robb any trout. Instead, smells of roast chicken, suckling pig, and fresh bread filled the ball. Jon, I want you to introduce you. Robb said. Sir Robar Royce, Sir Iman Huey, Brian of Tarth, and Lady Talisa. Pleased to meet you. Stark, you went to an army of 70,000 for an alliance and you came back with 3 swords. Jon asked. And a healer. Robb said. Lady Talisa healed me from my injury at the hands of a shadow assassin. Lord Stark also saved us from the Tyrells. Sir Loras would have hung us for treason otherwise. Robar said. Jon arched his eyebrows. You left a great deal unsaid in your Raven. As did you. Robb finished down his mug of ale. He stood up. Come on, Snow. We have much to talk about. But Robb, you have just arrived after many hours of riding. We had no food this morning, and you are still injured. Catelyn said. The dark-haired healer voiced her agreement. We have a battle to plan. And I have a great deal to tell Jon. I assume he has much to tell me. Robb said. Oliver Free stood up as well to accompany his lord. Sit. All of you should eat, and rest. Those are my orders. The 2 brothers walked off alone. They spoke for hours on many different things. Once again, Jon marveled at the speed of his brother's understanding of military matters. Robb had a natural flair for tactics. He crafted a plan of attack, imaginative, audacious, and quite dangerous. Jon would have to prepare the stage. Should I leave now? He asked. Robb shook his head. No, I will address the commanders first. They should know how the battle will unfold. Your position will be the most dangerous. There is no victory without risk. And no peace unless we win this war. Jon said. They met in the Great Hall with the lords and commanders of both the North and the Riverlands. Only the Blackfish and Lady Mormont were absent. Robb spoke about his month in the Reach, and the Stormlands. The story of the Baratheon brothers and the shadow assassin mesmerized the audience, and the well-respected Sir Robar confirmed the tale. Roose Bolton stood up. Lord Stark, if Stannis Baratheon is a kinslayer, and Renly is hurt, then who does the North support for the throne? I do not know, my lord. But it does not matter. Robb said. The great Jon banged a meaty fist on the table. I say we declare the North independent. There is the only man. Enough, my lord. We have more important things to do. Regardless of who wishes to hold King's Landing, we need to defeat Tywin Lannister and break his army. The North and the Riverlands will not deal with the Iron Throne from a position of weakness. Robb said. What are your plans for defeating Lord Tywin? Daisy asked. We prevent the Lannisters from going south. The Gold Road meets Blazewater Rush southwest of the God's Eye. It is a deep and swift river. Destroy the bridge there. Make certain it cannot be passed. Robb said. Lord Stark, there is no sign that the Lannisters are going south. Martin Rivers said. It does not matter. I will not risk them escaping. It is 250 miles due west from Harrenhal to the Red Fork. If their army moves that way, we will bleed them and make them pay for every mile they march. We will not give battle, but attack their horses and raid their supplies. Which leaves the northern crossing where the three forks meet. That is where the battle will be. It is the shortest way for Tywin to cross the Trident. Robb said. But Lord Stark. If the battle is at the ford, do you mean to split our forces? Edmure Tully asked. We do not have enough. Between the North and the Rivermen, we have 17,000 men. The Lannisters have 25,000 men. We cannot split our forces into two. How then, do you expect to stop them from crossing? Roose Bolton whispered. I will hold the other side. Jon said. My brother will hold the northern side of the fork. He will have 2,000 men. I will command the rest of the army south of the river. Robb said. 2,000 men cannot hold back an army of 10,000 horse and 15,000 foot. Even if they must cross a river. The Lannisters will overrun you. Bolton said. Lord Snow, I will join you. Tywin Lannister burned and pillaged my lands. He will not cross my river. Edmure said. My thanks, Lord Tully. I will need men who can work and build. Our defenses will not just be the river. Jon said. Catapult Umber was eager to join, as were Eddard and his brothers. Mallister and Blackwood men could lend a hand before returning to the main army. Robb would need as many soldiers as he could get to engage the Lannisters. So would Jon. Arya Stark saw the three-story inn first, with turrets and chimneys of white stone. Her night vision was better than both Gendry and Hot Pie, and she had been here before, with the king and her father, when her sister still bragged about being Joffrey's betrothed. She had a dire wolf then with dark golden eyes and grey fur, and she loved the wolf and the wolf loved her. That had been 1,000 years ago. They had travelled for a week in the shadow of the Lannister army, resting during the day and walking at night. Hot Pie had stolen a sackful of bread from Harrenhal, but the bread had gone hard and stale, and they finished it last night. They had no food left. The inn at the crossroads had seen better days. A rusted gibbet hung outside the yard and the wall of broken white stones was overgrown by moss. The ground was all weeds, dead brown grass, and a sea of brown mud. An ox cart with a broken wheel blocked the stables. Arya crept around in the darkness. There were no horses. For an inn to have no horses, even in the middle of the night, Arya wished once again she had Needle. Halt! Who goes there? A young girl was on the porch, pointing a crossbow. Hot Pie flung his hands up in the air. Gendry pulled the hands down. We mean no harm. We are just travelers. Gendry said. Two little boys and another girl appeared. They were Rooken size, but the girl with the crossbow must have been 9 or 10. Who are you? The oldest girl demanded. My name is Gendry. I am a smith. I heard that you had a forge. We could work for our keep. I am a baker. I can make bread, pies and cakes. Hot Pie shouted. The girl lowered the crossbow. We have rooms but no food. The Lannisters took all of our flour, ale, butter and meat. We are running away from them too. Hot Pie said. Why? The girl's face turned hard and suspicious as she raised the crossbow again. Hot Pie blubbered again. Arya came out of the shadows and into the moonlight. Who would not want to run away from the Lannisters? They killed our friend and forced us to work. The bony-faced girl relaxed. If she wasn't so thin, she might have been pretty. They hung my great-aunt from the gibbet outside. Some lady arrested the imp here, and they killed her for it. Can we stay for the night? Arya asked bluntly. The girl nodded. We don't turn away any children. She lit a short tallow candle as they walked in the dark inn. Arya could see many sets of curious eyes in the common room. It wasn't so bad before. But the Lannisters moved north and they took everything we have. And the wolves are going to kill us all, a boy's voice squeaked. Shut up, Ben. We all need to get some sleep. And the girl blew out the candle. That night, Arya dreamed that she was a wolf again, with a great pack that ranged over rivers, fields, and forests under the harvest moon. She was a great fierce she-wolf, stronger and swifter than her dozens and dozens of smaller cousins. She could kill stags, outrun horses and outfight lions. She had 4 brothers, and a sister that had been slain, but her brothers had not forgotten her. And they were coming to bring her home, her brothers, mighty and terrible, the Grey King with no fear and the White Wolf who stood alone. These brothers had drank the blood of men in battle. In wolf dreams, her belly was not hungry and she had no fear. She would run free. Arya awoke next morning, the yard loud with noise. Huddled outside were dozens of peasants, and the 10-year-old tried her best to guard the door. What's happened? She asked. Gendry pointed outside to the desperate small folk, praying and sobbing. They are fleeing from the Trident. 5 miles away, they saw soldiers, thousands of them. Willowheadle turned. They say that the Northmen are building across the Red Fork, ditches, walls, towers. There is a banner, a white dire wolf on a black field. The bloody wolf is here. Author's notes. To write this chapter, I reread the Arya chapters in the first 2 books. The scenes with the mountain and at Harrenhal are brutal. It is torture porn which culminates with the Ramsay/Theon/Reek plot. I realize this is a departure from the book, where Arya freed the Northmen, which led to Roose Bolton's men behaving just as bad or even worse at the castle. If you think about her arc, Arya's transformation from misfit to psychopath is convincing because she is traumatized by witnessing tremendous cruelty. In the book, both Hot Pie and Gendry want to stay in the castle, so Arya lies and says Vargo Hoat will chop off their feet. But by the time Jaime returns to Harrenhal in Book 4, all the servants except 3 are dead. Here, wild stories about the Tooth reach the castle, and Gendry is smart enough to understand the danger and try to leave. Is that a stretch? Possibly. At least at the castle, you get fed. But so was Arya not using Jaqen to kill Tywin, which is the obvious way to use a deadly assassin. But to be fair, she is young and just trying to survive. The inn at the crossroads is a cliché. It is the Dungeons and Dragons tavern where quests are given. That said, it is a cool cliché and also the place where Arya snaps, killing the tickler in both the book and the show. It is a great scene. An army marches on its stomach. It is attributed to either Napoleon or Frederick the Great. It has always been true, and Caesar's Gallic Wars really drive home how important supplies were. The Myraham is the name of the ship that Theon takes in the books. And in the books, he drinks and wenches with Patrek Malister. In the TV show, Brian slays 2 members of the Rainbow Guard in self-defense. In the books, Soloras kills the knights. This is more based on the book version. Discipline is the soul of the army is attributed to George Washington. It is humorous that von Steuben, a Prussian who became a military chief of staff to Washington, said that with regard to military discipline, I may safely say that no such thing existed in the Continental Army. In the books, there is a convoluted plot where Sodontos, the drunkard, is Baelish's point man in spiriting Sansa out of King's Landing. This is why she doesn't accept Tyrion's offer of safety and then she screws up the Tyrell plot by telling Dontos. I personally think this requires too many lucky bounces. Either that, or Petter Baelish has the luck of the Irish for 5 books, and upsets the Leprechauns in Season 7. The biggest problem is not the psychology but Tyron and Varys being too dumb to post spies on Sansa. How does Sansa make frequent trips to the Godswood to see Sodontos without others knowing? The water clock was invented by the Egyptians but improved by Greeks and Romans. In the Middle Ages, advanced water clocks were used in the Islamic world but seems to have disappeared from Western Europe. In the 4th century BC, Athenian brothels used water clocks to set a time limit on clients. Stand fast is Sir Eustace Osgree's castle in the Swan Sword, Dunk and Egg's second book. It is a small keep not as impressive as Cold Moat. Mace thinks this is a great boon for a bastard but Owen Fossoe does not. Owen's loyalty to Jon comes into play after the wars. Folia Flowers is mentioned in Aeron and Victorian Greyjoy's POV chapters. When Euron takes the Shield Islands, Folia is a servant to her many sisters at Oakenshield. Folia suggests that her mother and sisters serve naked, she becomes pregnant by Euron Greyjoy, and she thinks that she will be his salt wife. Later, we see her naked, tied to the prow of Euron's boat, the Silence, and her tongue has been cut out. The Carroballista is a Roman invention. The Roman improved on Greek technology to make a mounted field artillery. Each legion had 55 Carroballista and the weapons were used in sieges and battles, and on land and sea. Compared to Greek machines, the Roman ballista had an all-iron frame and wider sight mechanisms, making for greater accuracy. Reports in 400 AD have the ballista shooting 1,000 meters, or across the entire width of the Danube River. Wiki/Carroballista#. The suggestion from Roose Bolton is similar to his maneuver in the Battle of Green Fork. He force marches overnight to attack the Lannisters. It is absurd, GRM has them marching 60 miles at night. And they are exhausted the next morning. Readers may also note that Roose also orders a march to Duskendale, where the mountain ambushes them and Randil Tarly destroys the remaining Northmen. For so sworn good or evil an oath may not be broken and it will pursue an oath-keeper and oath-breaker to the world's end. In the Silmarillion, Fëanor and his sons swear a terrible oath to regain the Silmarils. Newsflash, it ends very, very badly. The sandwich was invented by the Earl of Sandwich in the 18th century. He did not want to get up to eat while he was playing cribbage. Of course, like many things, other cultures arguably created the dish earlier. For example, lamb wrapped in matzah was eaten at Passover around the start of the Roman Empire. It would not surprise me if Romans ate meat with bread. After all, many claim the Roman army invented pizza. This battle is a revision of the Battle of the Fords. The strategy that Tywin chooses in the books is odd. He probes dozens of places, some of them 10 miles away from each other. There is a quote where Brian explains the strategy to Catelyn. Imho, it would have been difficult to coordinate. The book talks about crossings near Riverrun, upstream, downstream. It may make sense if you vastly outnumber your opponent, but it seems more reasonable to send scouts and concentrate your attack. The Northern Army are still in the Riverlands, so Tywin can't waste hundreds of troops here or there. Tywin intends to cross the fork near the junction, send his men west on the Tumblestone side so protected from Riverrun. He plans to proceed to the Golden Tooth and besiege it. Of course, Tywin can also just go due west. That would cut 70 miles north and south, but it also means he has to pass through enemy castles and hilly terrain. Traveling along the river, where it is flat and there is fresh water, is much easier. That is Willow Heddle at the inn at the crossroads. The Heddles only appear in 2 Brian chapters in A Feast for Crows. In the books, Hot Pie gets a job at the Inn of the Kneeling Man and Gendry is at the Inn of the Crossroads defending orphans. In the TV show, the scenes happen at the inn at the crossroads. The woman who captures the imp is Catelyn Stark. Tywin Lannister hangs Masha Heddle for that. The battle strategy that Jon and Robb uses in the next chapter is derived from Greek and Roman tactics. Tywin has advantages in numbers and quality of troops. Jon and Robb are focused on the terrain and tactics. Chapter 21, The Wolves Go to War. Chapter text. The wolves go to war. Even in the afternoon, 6 beeswax candles on the silver and gold candelabra burned in the large red tent. Half a dozen ornate chairs clustered around a walnut-wood table and a tall, broad-shouldered man sat in the finest chair, his pale green eyes focused on letters. Tywin Lannister had paid a fortune for special ravens that could return back to his tent. The maesters who attended the birds were kept under strict guard, so that messages stayed secure. The tent flaps opened and 4 men walked in. The largest, 8 feet tall with massive shoulders and arms the size of tree trunks, towered over the rest, even though 2 of the other men were strong and powerful fighters. One of those warriors, with dark shoulder-length copper hair that matched his burnished bronze armor, stepped forward. "Lord Lannister, the Northerners have been fortifying the north and west side of the Trident, near the junction of the 3 forks." Adam Marbrand said. "How long?" Tywine asked. "At least 3 days, perhaps more," Marbrand said. "And why was I not told earlier?" Tywine said. A chinless man wearing a yellow doublet with a blue rooster shook in fear. The other 3 men were less craven. Clegane's men were scouting north. A dozen were found a day ago, hung from wooden gallows on the south side of the river. Crows and ravens ate their eyes. We believe they snuck over to spy on the Northerners and were caught. Clegane interrogated the peasants. The banner of the White Wolf has been flying for days. Marbrand said. "I will kill that fucker Snow. I will cut out his eyes and smash his head." The Mountain said. Tywine looked at his monster with distaste. "So why haven't you? I gave you 1,000 men." The chinless man clasped his hands together, looking more like a septon than a knight. Harris Swyft looked as brave as the chicken of his house. "There are miles and miles of walls, 10 feet high, with ditches and spikes. A dozen watchtowers rise from the ramparts and more are built every day. Smoke burns at all hours from behind the walls. Who knows what foul rituals and vile sorcery this bastard is conjuring?" Harris ranted. Tywine revised his opinion. A chicken had more courage and sense than the Knight of Cornfield. "My lord, I beg the honor of leading the attack. The wolves captured my father. My cousins were dragged in chains from the Golden Tooth to Riverrun." Lyle Crickehall cried. The strong boar clenched his hand like fists. Adam Marbrand hid his emotions better. "Lord Lannister, I would welcome my chance to try my steel against this snowboy. My father may have withdrawn from battle, but I seek revenge for my brother, good sister, and nephew." Tywine snorted and locked his eyes on Clegane. "Have you gone soft, Clegane? He killed your men. Cross the river and kill him." The brute stomped from the tent, with Harris Swyft following. Tywine stared at the 2 angry knights. "Swyft is a lost cause. I thought you 2 had more sense. What banner do the Starks fly in war?" The strong boar looked confused, much like his fierce but not over-bright father. Sir Adam answered. "A snarling grey dire wolf on a white field. Our reports do not mention the bastard having his own coat of arms, and yet, he shows up, flying a white wolf. Why?" Tywine answered his own question. "He wants us to know he is there, for you to attack him. Lord Lannister, we all want to attack him. We know his crimes in the Westerlands. If we send 10,000 men across, we would break his defenses, regardless of the wall." Marbrand said. "And how many men would you lose? What do you think Snow has prepared? Caltrops? Iron spikes? He will have trapped the river and dug pits." Tywine said. "Caltrops and spikes will kill 100 men at most. But we will still win, and we would cross the Red Fork." Marbrand said. "Our scouts say the main army is west. No, Clegane will waste his scum to set off the traps. Some jobs are suitable for dogs and goats. Lions will attack when we are ready." Tywine said, dismissing them. He called for a maester and sent a raven to the Inn of the Kneeling Man. Robb greeted Sir Brynden as he led the houses pledged to house Tully into the command tent. Robb and his guard had ridden last night past the Inn of the Kneeling Man. They bivouacked near the river road, and rivermen from the west and the south joined them. Piper and Van's men still marched, but the bulk of the army had assembled. Even Roose Bolton and Rickard Karstark attended the meeting, although their infantry were 20 miles behind, near the inn. Wendell Mondaly and Daisy Mormont stood closest to Robb, as he inspected the large map of Riverlands. Sir Robar and Sir Iman answered questions about the Tyrells, as newcomers sought to hear wild tales about Baratheon treachery and the Red Witch. Robb welcomed the distraction which allowed the Blackfish and Martin Rivers to speak quietly about the enemy forces. The Lannister army was less than 40 miles away. "The walls are astonishing. Pawin rode back with a report. The White Wolf has built miles and miles of defenses, ditches, towers, walls. He has scorpions, tread bucket, ballista and all sorts of terrifying weapons. He will give the lions a fierce battle. Sir Stephen said. Snow has a catapult with him, too. Catapult John Umber. My son will deal a mighty blow, just as he did at the Tooth and at the Whispering Woods. The great Jon roared. Hoster and Brindon are there too. Sir Lucas Blackwood said of his two brothers. Blackwood's built the walls and will defend the Red Fork with Sir Ed Muir. Then they will be swept away. Brindon Blackwood doesn't know a sword from his ass. And Hoster, well, that boy is so weak that my girls could snap him like a twig. And if Blackwood men build the walls, no doubt they will fall from a stiff breeze. John Osbracken said. You bitter old fool. You are hoping for our defeat. Do you plan to betray us to the Lannisters? Titus Blackwood yelled. Face sense, you dolt. Jon Snow has only 2,000 men. If the Lannisters launch an attack with their full army, the walls would fall. John Osbracken retorted. The two lords went chin to chin, and their relatives, Harry Rivers and Hendry Bracken, faced off with Sir Lucas and little Ben Blackwood. Ben was Cale Vance's new squire and looked tiny compared to the broad and sturdy Hendry. Lord Titus was a few inches taller, but Lord John Os was heavier with thick shoulders and burly arms fattened by age. Rob sighed. No one could resolve the Blackwood, Bracken feud, but he had enough arguing for one night. Stop. Lord Bracken is right. Rob said sternly. If the Lannisters launched their army over the Red Fork, they would shatter the wall. 10,000 men could sweep away those defenses. An astonished Great Jon yelped. But, should we not send more men? What will happen to Maester Snow then? Jon would most likely die. Even the best general cannot defeat more than 4 times his number, and the Westermen are better armed and armored. Rob said to the shocked crowd. What is the key to defeating Lord Tywine? What has Jon focused on since my father was slain? Rob's remarks stunned the tent into silence. He answered his own question. Food, my brother has focused on the food, stored in wagons, guarded by the infantry. Sir Brindon. The wagons are 40 miles away from the Trident. The roads are narrow and rutted. It will take 4 days to reach the Red Fork. And the crossing will be slow. The Blackfish said. If the Lannisters send all their cavalry across the Trident, they would abandon their supply train. We could counterattack the wagons and capture their supplies. The men holding the Red Fork would die. But the Lannister army would be doomed. Rob said. Stark, my son Eddard is on the northern side. How could you abandon him? Rickard Karstark cried. His 2 older sons, Harryon and Torren, scowled. Lord Karstark, if I am willing to sacrifice my brother, then you can lose one of your sons. Rob snapped. If they cross the Red Fork, the Lannisters have to travel over 300 miles to the Golden Tooth. Without food or supplies, how would their men fare? They would starve long before they returned west. They cannot cross the Blue Fork. Our troops would hold the south. If they fled north, we would crush them against the Trident or Iron Man's Bay. Rob's face stayed hard. My lords and knights, Jon knew all of this. My brother and I planned this together. He volunteered to hold the river crossing. 2,000 lives would buy victory over 25,000 if Lord Tywine ordered a full attack. Lord Stark, is there no other way? Sir Brindon asked. Rob shrugged. My brother does not think Lord Tywine will send his entire cavalry. Jon believes that the Old Lion is too wary, and that after the Broken Bridge and the Golden Tooth, Tywine will probe and search for weak points first. Jon expects the Lions to send a few hundred men, then 1,000, and only when those have failed, mount a full attack. In that case, we have several days and our forces would be ready to charge the Lannister flank during the attack. But you are not certain? Great Jon Umber asked, worried about his son. No, Lord Umber. Tywine Lannister may be wary but his men are not. The Mountain, Sellswords, and the Westerman Knights, these are not men of caution. But there is a price to be paid in battle, and House Stark has fought wars for 8,000 years. Rob said. In the gloom that fell over the tent, Rob did not notice the shadow of concern that passed over Roose Bolton's face or the mutterings of Ryman Free. He thought of his father's words. A lord may love the men he commands, but he cannot be a friend to them. One day, he may need to sit in judgment on them, or send them forth to die. My brother, Rob thought, I may have sent him to die. But John knew. He did not shrink from duty. And Rob would not either. The food had disappeared around the copper lake. Rabbits, goats, boars, stags. The scent of horse and mule were strong, but they were guarded by men with sharp spears and axes. Nymeria did not care, but her little cousins feared men, even dead men. Her pack was gaunt and silent, hundreds of wolves hungry for prey. They looked to her, the alpha, to guide them. And so she went north, leading her pack. They passed through burnt villages, the bones of men hanging from apple trees picked clean of any fruit, and ruined farms with no sign of life. The she-wolf sniffed in the air. In the brambles and tangles of the underbrush, along the narrow gullies and ditches hidden from the roads, Nymeria smelled the scent of a girl, her girl. There had been a skinny little girl once, that had hugged her, and cradled her in sleep, and even tried to give her a bath. The dire wolf had lost that girl, somewhere near the deep and swift waters, where half-drowned trees dripped on pools of brackish water. Nymeria remembered a hug from the crying girl, then a lot of babble, and then rocks thrown that hit her in the snout and ribs. But that was 1,000 years ago, when she was weak and small. Now she was grown, a queen among wolves, strong and fierce, like the brothers of her litter. Nymeria heard the bells first through the trees. Men on horses, led by one with 3 silver bells in his long braided hair, oiled with fatty grease drippings. They rode through the rain armed in leather and chain, swords and axe clanking. There were 4 men, muttering their man-talk, pointing into the dark, wary as a baby fawn. Nymeria waited until the men passed and the horses began to snort and whinny in fear. She rushed forward and ripped the belly of a brown charger open, blood and guts spilling on the dirt road. The other mounts screamed and reared in terror, and dozens of other wolves hurtled through the rain to attack. Her brothers and sisters killed the hairy man, tore apart the feet and arms of a dark man, and savaged the pale man fleeing as his horse succumbed to bites at the thighs and knees. Only the belled man kept his saddle, and drew a curved metal claw, standing his ground. Nymeria slid into the shadows, and when the man swung the blade forward, the she-wolf sprang and clamped her jaw around the neck, biting through hair, skin and bones, blood spurting into the air. Her paws landed on the muscled back of the horse, ripping and tearing, and the dappled stallion fell heavily to the ground. Nymeria spat out 3 silver bells, and the head rolled on the ground. The pack fell upon the wounded horses and devoured them alive. Black smoke from 24 fires drifted south over the Trident. The Northmen and Rivermen had cut down every single tree on the northern shore of the Trident. The logs, thick as a man's thigh, were stacked in huge piles, to be sharpened at the top and hardened by fire. These were stakes, and John put the vast quantities of timber to good use. 3,000 men had worked 6 long back-breaking days to build a set of fortifications unlike any seen before in the Riverlands. John's army was 2,000 strong, but Malisters, Blackwoods, even curious detachments from other commanders had volunteered. Eddard Carstark and Small Janumber led the men in the hard work, and Chet, Geryon, and the other Wintertown boys dashed here and there, relaying orders. John stood at the palisade 10 feet high, 1,000 feet back from the north edge of the Red Fork. Even the best archer in the Raven's Teeth could only shoot 1,000 feet with a weirwood bow. 200 feet from the river, John had constructed the first trench, 10 feet wide and 10 feet deep, in a jagged V-shape that stretched the entire 2 miles of the fords. The edges were anchored by the Red Fork, as it turned swift, wide and deep. An attacker would have to descend, cross the narrow bottom, and climb out the opposite side of the ditch. That trench had been dug to break up a charge over the Red Fork, and to prevent the enemy from swooping down at night, or volleying arrows at men working during the day. John could not spare any men or boys for guard duty. Every soldier exerted his full energy on the fortifications. With the first trench as an obstacle, there were no attacks besides a band of foul-mouthed soldiers wearing the 3 dogs of House Clegane. Ghost had tracked them, and John and Umber men had captured the foul-mouthed bunch, and hung them all after questioning them. The defensive works that followed were far more important. 400 and 700 feet from the first obstacle were 2 other trenches, 12 feet wide and 10 feet deep. A stream flowed off the Blue Fork, and by careful digging, John diverted that water into the inner trench, where the ground was low and level with the plain. Behind the trenches, he constructed a rampart and a palisade 10 feet high. The rampart was excavated into the ground, making one final deadly ditch to cross. On top of the palisade, John built an embattled breastwork with crude wooden roof. The roof would absorb any missile fire from above. The breastworks would offer cover and concealment to archers and spearmen. Large stakes, cut like stag's horns, jutted around where the breastwork joined the rampart, checking the ascent of the enemy. They had constructed 24 watchtowers, and the men steadily built more in between, so that the final intervals between each station would be 80 yards. The siege machines were stored near the watchtowers, and ramps were built so that sets of horses pulling the carro ballista could climb onto the palisade. The hard work had been the extensive ditches and the palisade. That had taken a great deal of manpower. Now, the Wintertown boys were directing another set of defenses that would cost the Lannisters dearly. Closest to the walls, short trenches were being dug, 5 feet deep. Sets of stakes were planted in rows and fastened to the bottom, while the boughs stuck out. Any who stepped in would impale themselves on the sharp stakes. These were called gravestones. In front of those, shorter pits of 2 or 3 feet deep were dug, and stakes were planted in them, with the tips projecting not more than a few fingers above the ground. The earth was smoothed around the fingers and the pit covered with twigs and brushwood. These were lilies, named for the resemblance to those flowers. Lastly, there were blocks of wood a foot long with iron spikes, buried in the earth and scattered in all directions. These were spurs. Lannister men would have to cross rows and rows of deadly traps under deadly fire. By the old gods, Snow, those Southron knights will shit themselves when they see this. Smalljan yelled. Chet and Clydas guided a team of 2 mules up a ramp. John stepped behind the carro ballista, and peered toward the river. He aimed the bolt toward the Red Fork. The siege machine could reach as far as the middle of the muddy river, but the Wintertown boys had orders to aim the deadly weapon only at enemies past the second trench. I have not read about these types of defenses in the histories at Blackwood Hall. Hoster said, as he tended a dozen ravens at the watchtower. Could I shoot the ballista? Just once. The Smalljan pleaded. Umber, we need every single bolt. We still need to do more to prepare, dig pits, set traps, stock missiles, erect watchtowers. John said. Maester Snow, we must be ready. You have 2 miles of walls and many more ditches and pits. You have more traps than I have ever seen. Edmure Tully said. John shook his head. After finishing the last ditch, 1,000 Vance, Mallister and Blackwood men had departed to join Rob's host. Once again, there were only 2,000 to hold the northern side of the fork. We can never stop preparing. When Lord Tywine truly attacks, we will be outnumbered, perhaps by as 4 or 5 times. We will need every single bolt, arrow, spear and sword. Our traps will not defeat the Lannisters, only bleed their men. We will have to defend the walls, and send troops to weak points. We will have much to do when the true battle begins. The more we prepare now, the easier we kill the enemy then. Eddard Karstark chuckled at Smalljan's grumbling. Satin rushed across to them, waving his hands. Maester, we see men crossing the Trident. Jerry spotted them from the watchtower. John looked through the spyglass. A huge man in thick plate rode a giant destrier, his head encased in a full helmet with only slits for eyes. Behind him, dirty unwashed men at arms carried a banner with 3 dogs on a yellow field. It is the Mountain and his thieves. John said. John blew a war horn. Soldiers working on pits and traps pulled back immediately. Ladders and ramps were dropped down, and men rushed back over the palisade. In a moment, the entirety of his forces were on the walls. John continued to gaze through the glass. He made a slight motion to Hoster, who released a raven to fly over the fortifications. Maester Snow, what should we do? Should we fire the siege engines? Edmure asked. I am counting the men. John said. Smalljan, you are a good hunter. How many do you see? The Smalljan gazed out from under his hand. More than 500, less than 1,000. No ballista. Let them get closer. John said. But this is the mountain. We must attack. Edmure said. He is a vile creature who pillaged and burnt the lands of my bannermen. He raped John Osbraken's daughter. Everything you say is true, but we must wait, sir. Our defences are built for a charge of 10,000 men. The mountain is a dog who must be put down. In single combat or in a charge, he is deadly. But 1,000 feet away, with a wall and a field of traps, he poses little threat. 1,000 men cannot take this wall. John said. His men are scum. My father took us to Wendish town for a fair years ago. The mountain's men burned down the town's timber walls. When small folk fled the fire, they shot them down with arrows, even women with suckling babes. Bryndon Blackwood spat. We are not women with babes. We are not small folk to be burnt out of our homes. We are 2,000 strong and ready for battle. John said. Lord Snow, his men could still shoot at us. Eddard Carstark said. I doubt it. The idiots waded through the river. John said. Why does that matter? Eddard asked. The bowstrings. Bows are strung with sinew, and those strings must be taut. If a string absorbs water, it loses tension. And a wet bow does not shoot well. Beeswax oilskin might reduce that problem, but the mountain's men are unlikely to be well equipped. Let them get closer, and they will die like flies. John said. The mountain's men were prepared for quick raids. They were not skilled at siegecraft. They had no ladders, rope, or any means to fill the ditch. It took a long time for the mountain to pass the first trench, and even longer to pass the second. They dragged and carried their horses down and through the 2 ditches. After the sun had risen high in the sky, the Westermen formed a line of horses, with archers and spearmen. With a loud roar, the mountain charged, the entire cavalry of 500 behind him. The first screams were the sounds of horses dying. The mountain's brown destrier stepped on a stake sunk into a pit, a lily with iron thorns. The horse went down, the front right leg broken, and Gregor Clegane fell to the ground. His men fared worse. Their horses stepped on nails and spikes, and many men were flung from the saddle, into other traps. As the first line crashed, the second line smashed into the injured horses, falling into yet more rows of iron hooks and fire-sharpened wood. Scores of horses were crippled, and the screams of men joined their steeds. Dozens of the mountain's men were skewered on iron hooks, and wooden stakes. Hundreds of others were dazed and shocked by their failed charge. Gregor Clegane stood up and grabbed his 6-foot-long sword with both hands. With one brutal stroke, Clegane sliced off the head of his wounded horse. The enraged mountain hacked to death 7 other steeds before screaming at his men. Clegane's archers shot arrows at the palisade, but they fell well short. Again, Clegane went berserk, and swung the massive blade through several boughs. The fearful men around him scattered, until order was restored. The men formed a ragtag line and marched toward the wall, still 400 feet away. Snow, should we do anything? Edmure Tully asked. John's captains were assembled at the center, ready to spread out along the battlements. We watch, sir. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. John replied. And the enemy suffered. They fell into pits. They stepped on hooks and stakes. They were impaled on tree trunks. Even injured, the men were forced to continue, lest they be trampled by their companions. Finally the enemy had reached the final ditch 100 feet away and flooded 10 feet deep with water. Less than half of the mountain's men were still standing. As they began to swim across, John raised his hand. They are too far still for spears. But if you can shoot a volley of arrows at a massed group or pick them off as they emerge from the water, do so. John took out a crossbow, wound the winch, and shot. The bolt pierced a man's eye and the barbed point passed through the back of the skull. Dozens of men fell as arrows rained down from the wall. Even as they died, the mountain forced his men forward. Incredibly, Clegane managed to get 50 men near the walls. Half a dozen arrows protruded from his thick plate armor. They say the mountain wears chainmail under the plate armor, and boiled leather under the mail. Edmure said. John could kill the mountain with one shot of the Caro ballista. At point-blank range, the shaft would rip through Clegane's body. John wanted that very much, but he needed to save the surprise for the true attack. Clegane was merely a dog. The Carrow ballista was for the lions. The mountain's men made ready to climb the walls. Small Janumber and Eddard Carstark grinned as they climbed down to the ground on the back of the palisade. The timber walls were stout but holes were set at chest level, too small for a sword but wide enough for a spear trip. As the mountain's men climbed, a dozen spears sprouted from the walls, pushing through chests, necks and bellies. From above, more long spears thrust down, aiming for heads and shoulders. At last, as Clegane realized his failure, he ordered a retreat. More men fell as the North End rivermen fired arrows into the back of their heads. Dying and injured men were left behind, too weak to make the trek back. Clegane ran away like a dog with his tail between the legs. Hundreds of bodies, perhaps 2/3 of the initial force, and hundreds more horses lay dead or dying. Crows and common ravens descended on the battleground, first a few, but then a dozen, and then the air swarmed with blackbirds, pecking at eyeballs and ripping at soft flesh with sharp beaks. Carrion birds feasted on the mountain's men. The raven that was Jon Snow flew 2 mornings later over the Red Fork, ignoring thousands of blackbirds that clustered between the palisade and the river. It passed Northmen and Riverlanders setting more traps, sharpening weapons, and boasting of their fighting prowess. It passed scouts choking on the smell of dead and roasting bodies, and small folk cutting trees under the eyes of soldiers. It landed at the edge of the war camp, amidst a sea of red tents. There were dozens and dozens of banners, representing the might of the Westerlands, testifying to the respect that Tywin Lannister demanded from his liege lords. Jon passed boars, badgers, beetles, a green arrow and a red ox, crossed halberds, crossed spears, a tree cat, and many more. Besides the gold lion, 2 sigils stood out, an orange burning tree of House Marbrand, and a pile of gold on a sky-blue field of House Lefford. Their prominence meant that their prestige had not been damaged by the taking of the tooth or that Lord Tywin charged them to find redemption on the battlefield. A sea of soldiers parted to allow a tall slender man to ride forth, flanked by the Mountain and a dozen other highborn commanders. Tywin Lannister wore impressive but gaudy armor, a full suit of steel plate enameled in crimson and highlighted in gold. The golden sunbursts on the armor matched his heavy cloth of gold greatcloak. His great helm, a roaring lion with ruby eyes, rested on the right side of his saddle and his gold-pummeled long sword was buckled to his left. Even his war horse wore gilded red armor. The Raven had spent enough time staring the old lion. Lord Lannister was traveling north to the Red Fork. The knights would follow, and then the archers and spearmen. The Raven flew north again, until the muddy waters of the Red Fork were in sight. Then he cut the connection, and stirred again in his makeshift office in the central watchtower. Ghost licked his hand, and Jon wondered the limits of warging. Stannis's witch conjured a shadow to slay Renly. Could a raven kill Lord Tywin? Not likely, but Jon thought about the stories of Brynden Rivers, that he could order packs of gaunt wolves to hunt down his enemies and carrion crows to whisper secrets in his ear. Bloodraven was a better walk than me, Jon thought. He stepped forth onto the palisade, to look over the field of battle. Each morning, he walked the 2 miles of the wall, to greet the men and inspect any new construction. Maester, why haven't they attacked yet? The grumbling came from the Smalljan. Much like his father, the Smalljan was a warrior and a drinker. Last night, after being relieved from patrol duty, the heir to House Umber had declared after many cups of ale that he would be the first to shove his sword up Tywin Lannister's bunghole, assuming his father had not done so first. They are preparing. The Lannister army will not attack blindly. They will bring ladders, battering rams, siege equipment. But it will be hard to bring them over the river, and then through the trenches and fields. Jon said. Are we certain they will still attack? The Mountain ran like a little dog. Edmure Tully said. Lord Tywin has dedicated his life to the Lannister name. He did not want to leave Harrenhal, but the loss of the tooth forced him to return west. He may not want to attack these walls, but he would look a coward if he did not. And where would go? Back to Harrenhal. Jon said. Harrenhal is a mighty castle. It would be impossible to take, if well defended. Edmure said. Every house that has held Harrenhal have suffered extinction, and rather quickly. If Tywin Lannister wishes, he is welcome to a cursed castle. Jon said. They say that Harren the Black cursed the castle when he died. and that he still haunts the halls, and any who looks upon his ghost, bursts into flame. Hoster Blackwood said. Then it is too bad that Lord Tywine did not meet Black Harrin. John japed. He doubted that Harrin had anything on his mind besides being burned alive by Balerion. We have finished the watchtowers. We have cut nearly all the timber nearby, for traps, arrows and bolts for the ballista. We have burnt the bodies of the dead to clear the trenches. Now we wait. 2 days later, the sky was grey and threatening when John woke from dreams of blood and fire to the sound of ravens. Hoster Blackwood kept half a dozen ravens in iron cages, but there were dozens and dozens of blackbirds in his chamber, croaking a deep rasping call, staring at him with hard beady eyes. He stepped outside, and saw ravens perched on every watchtower like dark messengers. The ravens had left the field, and abandoned the bodies below. That could mean only one thing. They expected fresh meat today. John walked out, ravens flying around him, ghost at his side. The night patrols saluted him, and he dispatched messengers to wake up the other commanders. He stepped forward to peer over the edge of the wall. The Lannister army amassed on the south shore, and he could see siege towers with battering rams, and platforms for catapults. John summoned Chet and his crew and instructed them to prepare and bring the ballista up to the wall. Squires prepared a meal of warm bread, cheese, and watered-down ale. John ordered fresh barrels of dried beef and smoked fish to be opened, insisting that all eat and drink to keep up their strength. There were other fish besides trout, and John munched on smoked herring and anchovies packed in oil and salt. In minutes, the entire wall bustled with activity as men prepared for the battle. Rivermen prayed to the warrior and the father for good fortune in battle. The Northmen were silent, for the old gods only had power where a heart tree could see. John busied himself with his machines. The 30 Carrow ballista were at the front of the wall, hidden by battlements. Each machine had 150 bolts to shoot. Further back, 4 trebuchet and 6 catapults stood, armed with heavy stones. John had concentrated all his siege machines near the center, with the Wintertown crew ready to fire a barrage of 10 bolts at a time. "What in the 7 hells are you doing?" the small John asked. Eddard Karstark had washed his long hair, taking extra care with the 2 braids that hung over his ears. He trimmed wisps of beard from his neck with a pair of scissors. "If I die, I want to look my best when I meet my ancestors at Carhold." The small John roared in laughter and then waved his massive sword in a circle. "The only thing they will care about is how much blood is on your axe and how many men you killed. Not everyone is as ugly as you, Umber," Eddard replied, as he returned to his grooming. "Are they always like that?" Geryon whispered to John. "Like what?" John asked. "Savages ready to fight and die," Jerry said. John chuckled. "We are Northerners. The small John and Eddard are just passing time. It is hard to wait before battle." It had been 5 days since the mountains raid failed spectacularly. The Northmen were eager to fight. Thousands and thousands of Westermen began to wade across the river. Archers carried their bows and arrows above their heads, protecting them from the water, and spearmen marched in formation. Teams of horses and mules pulled wagons across. John could see the burning orange tree of House Marbrand and the brindled black and white board of House Crickehall at the front, although there were many banners. The Lannister army stopped at the first ditch, 200 feet from the river. The infantry struggled to cross with difficulty, but the Highborn had a different plan. At the center of the ditch, men unloaded wooden planks, 20 feet long, to make a bridge sturdy and wide enough for 10 horses to pass. After 100 knights rode over, teams of drays, plough horses trained for heavy tasks, began to pull the siege towers. "Those must be 20 feet high. They dwarf our wall," Ed Muirtully said. Indeed, the Lannister siege towers were higher than the northern watchtowers. "Then we will fight in the shade," Brynden Blackwood declared. The small John gave the Blackwood heir a hearty slap on the back, and roared his approval. "We are not doing that either," John said. The Lannister army made it to the second ditch, 400 feet from the wall. Hundreds of soldiers were on the sides, but they waited for the cavalry to cross at the center. The Westermen had again built a bridge, and 8 horses in 2 rows pulled the first tower. John signaled to Chet, and the boy raised his arms to alert the other crew members. 5 for the horses. 5 for the tower. Fire! 10 6-foot-long spears boomed from the palisade, zooming through the air with deadly accuracy. The first bolt exploded through the head of the lead plough horse, and killed the horse behind. John's eyes were not on the many dying and wounded horses of the hapless team. 2 of the bolts stuck harmlessly in wooden base of the tower. One had knocked a catapult placed in the tower, plunging the machine into the bridge. But 2 other bolts smashed into the right support beams. If the frame had been bound in iron or steel, that would not have mattered. But the tower, poorly constructed with wood, listed to the side, and then teetered over. With a mighty crash, the siege tower fell, crushing soldiers and horses behind. Maester Snow, should we aim at the other siege towers? Chet yelled. John shook his head, wait until the towers are closer. But kill the teams of plough horses. They are an easy target. And shoot as well at the knights, particularly near banners. You heard the Maester. Chet yelled. Fire again. Another third of the carroballistas fired, and again horses screamed as they died. One bolt pierced a knight in plate armor and sank half its length into a nearby wagon, so the man was skewered and hung like a corpse on a gibbet. Then the last third of the carroballistas fired, and knights fell as their horses died or ran for cover. The mighty war destriers were trained for the chaos of the battlefield, but the barrage of deadly bolts was overwhelming. Horses who had not crossed the bridge reared and bucked, throwing off riders. Other horses galloped forward into the field of traps, triggering pits and spikes with predictable results. The ballistas fired again and again, 10 at a time, inflicting horrendous damage. The dead piled up, horses killed, or knights crushed or impaled on bolts. The discarded banners of the western houses lay trampled on the muddy ground. The north destroyed a second siege tower as it attempted to cross. Maester, what about them? Smalljan pointed at the crews behind the tread buckets and catapults. We save those for when the infantry mass for a charge. We want to kill men when they group together, John said. But until then, keep firing. On the wall, only the sound of ballista fire could be heard as the crews of boys aimed with care and then shot. On the fields, men and horses died in droves. The brutality of the northern attack shocked the Lannister forces, but the battle had only begun. The artillery had killed hundreds, but there were still thousands of soldiers left. There were many more men to be killed. A few miles to the south and west, Robb Stark held a conference of his commanders. He had 4 sets of forces. Spears and infantry holding the river road, a mixed group of knights, archers and infantry in the center, light cavalry and rivermen outriders, and a hardcore of Northmen knights and elite infantry. The men on the river road, nearest to the Trident, reported that the Lannister army crossed the Red Fork that morning. How many men have passed the ford? And have we spotted Lord Tywine? Robb asked. 6 or 7,000, Lord Stark. We saw Marbrand and Crickehall banners leading the way. Many knights and wagons with siege equipment crossed. Harry On said. Lord Tywine has always favored commanding a strong reserve. He did so in the War of the Nine Penny Kings. I would guess he has over 4,000. And many will be his best fighters. He will use them to break our lines, and attack our flanks. Lord Mallister said. Lord Lefford, Lord Lydon, and Lord Serret command the troops on our side of the Trident near the river road. They have pikesmen, spearmen, archers, axemen, and swordsmen mixed with some cavalry. Most of the knights have gone to attack your brother, but the largest set of forces guard the passage. Perhaps 10,000 men. Willis Mandaily said. And where are the wagons of food and supplies? Robb asked. They were in the center, between Lord Tywine and the troops at the Red Fork. Our scouts believe it to be thinly guarded, the Blackfish said. Lord Stark, near the wagons, my men have spotted a small force of 2,000 freeriders, sellswords and green recruits fresh to war. They are all mounted, but with a strong attack, we may be able to sweep them away. Roose Bolton said. It appears to be an easy target. There are a few thousand infantrymen lagging behind and guarding the rear. But they would be slow to rescue the wagons. Tywine's knights have rushed north to do battle with your brother. Ricard Karstark said. The suggestion was clear. They could crush the Green Boys, and force Lord Tywine and his commanders to expend men near the Trident to return south and defend the wagons. But how did Lord Bolton know that these were Green recruits? And if they were fresh from the farms, city and docks, then why would they be mounted on horses? If he routed that force, then Lord Seret could wheel back and flank the northern army. Rob was certain his men could fight that off, but that was only one set of forces. If Lord Tywine were to launch his reserve from the east, they would be encircled. Rob's eyes narrowed. That small force was mounted, so that the northerners would give chase. He wondered who knew about this trap. Lord Bolton, would you care to lead the attack on the supply train? Rob asked. The liege lord's face betrayed no emotions. Of course, Lord Stark. I can only give you 1,000 men. Your infantry will be needed on the road. Rob said. The Lannisters will outnumber my forces 2 to 1. Roose Bolton said. We will all be outnumbered. I want you to attack and then retreat. Tywine Lannister's army is a snake headed north. We will attack, and then try to extend his line and draw it toward us. Lord Bolton, you will attack the supply wagons. Torren Karstark, command the forces on the river road. Attack and go at Lord Seret, Lydon and Lefford to break ranks and pursue. Lord Blackwood, take the center forces and do the same. Do not commit to pitched battle but have them follow you. Martin Rivers, do the same with the Outriders. Rob said. The Lannisters may chase but it won't be too far. The Blackfish warned. Lord Tywine's commanders are too disciplined. We don't need much. Just extend their line. Rob dismissed his commanders to their orders. His guard remained. The Blackfish also kept Lord Mallister, the Pipers, the Vances and the Brackens. He also called back Harry on Karstark and Willis Marndaly. The Karstark fumed, and Rob arched his eyebrow in response. Why are we not fighting? Harry on said. Northmen have always attacked, not hidden from battle. My brother is with your brother, defending the Red Fork against a horde of Lannisters. As heir of Carhold, I wish to do my part for the honor of the North. Rob waited a beat, until he was sure that Roose Bolton was too far away to hear. He addressed his men and Daisy Mormont. I held you back because you are my strongest, most experienced fighters, the best of the Northern and the Riverman army. And I need you for the most important attack. So you do have a plan. Daisy Mormont said. Our center and left will be weak. John is also outnumbered to the north. But the Blackfish and I will have 6,000 men. Let their army chase and attempt to flank our other forces. We will attack the reserve directly. We will kill the Old Lion and win the war. Rob said. North of the Red Fork, the battle continued. The bulk of the Lannister army and most of the commanders were in the center, attempting to move wagons and mounted knights over the trench. Enough spearmen and archers had crossed, that John had sent Edmure Tully and Bryndon Blackwood west and Smalljon and Eddard Karstark east on the wall, to fend off invaders with ladders, battering rams, and siege hooks. John raised his hand. The first line ceased firing. And then slowly the second line shot less and less. Finally, when they finished, the third line began to take more time to reload, until it appeared that all the ballista had run out of bolts. A ragged cheer broke out on the field below, and the mounted cavalry began to form lines. Under withering arrow fire, foot soldiers had attempted to disarm traps, fill pits, and clear a path for the knights. The intrepid men, armed with crude shovels and pickaxes, had made it as far as the final water-filled trench, where with a row of shields over their heads, managed to build a makeshift bridge. Almost all of them were dead or gravely injured, but John applauded their courage. Time passed slowly as the forces arranged themselves on the field below. John wondered how the Westermen planned to navigate the final 30 feet to the wall. Even after passing the moat, there were more traps and the final rampart. Perhaps the knights expected the force of the charge to be so great that the North would abandon the wall. No one would never find out. As the horses began to gain speed, John raised his hand to signal the crews of all the siege weapons, tread buckets, catapults and ballista. Each ballista still had at least 50 bolts left, and the tread buckets and catapults had yet to be used. John had paused artillery fire to conserve ammunition and draw out a bold advance. The Westermen charged, and John's Wintertown boys opened fire. Barbed bolts ripped through the Lannister lines, killing men and horses with ease. Tread buckets and catapults unleashed giant stones, crushing several knights at once. And the stones and bodies of the dead remained on the field, blocking the advance of other knights, a deadlier version of the Whispering Wood. There, John used an ironwood lever to launch a mishmash of boards, nails and spikes to pen in the cavalry. At the Red Fork, John had more than catapult John Umber and the foresters. The battery of ballistas, tread buckets and catapults fired again, and a cloud of dust and blood swirled over the field. Severed arms, helmets, lances, swords and even entire horses were hurled into the air as charging knights collided. The disastrous charge was repulsed with enormous casualties and a cheer went up on the walls. "Maester, Maester!" Geryon cried and pointed to the west. John turned and saw 2 burning watchtowers. The Westerman could not have carried the wall so easily, and he doubted a few fire arrows could ignite such a blaze. He extended his right arm to a raven, and the bird flew to the watchtower. John watched and saw sour-faced thugs led by a tall man with steel greaves. A pack of 9 vicious hunting hounds snarled as they dragged down Tully soldiers to be killed with axes and long knives. And in the midst of the fighting, there was an ugly young man, big-boned with pink blotchy skin, a wet-lipped crazed smile, and small colorless eyes, like dirty water frozen in winter. John realized who those eyes belonged to. Ramsay was no Dustin. He was Roose Bolton's bastard. Robb Stark stared across the field, looking keenly at the nearby hill with a spyglass. He was mounted and surrounded by his honor guard. Lady Catelyn was there as well, with her sworn sword, Brian. He could see the Lannister reserve, half mounted and half foot. It was a huge force, 5,000 strong. Like Robb, Lord Tywine was on the high ground, watching the unfolding battle and ready to commit his force when and where they were needed most. Battle was too strong a word for the current skirmishes on the southern side. Near the river, Torrhen Stark had arranged a wall of pikes to fend off light cavalry. Lord Blackwood had done his job well, and bands of Westermen chased west. The Liege Lord and Martin Rivers had moved slowly, and seemed satisfied to taunt the enemy, rather than fight. Even miles away, Robb knew the only furious fighting was on the northern side of the Trident. "We need to get Tywine Lannister off his ass," Robb declared. He did not want to charge uphill to attack a strong reserve. "That old lion will not move without a reason," Brynden Tully said. "Then we shall give him one, sir." Robb called his best warriors, Harry on Carstark, Great Jon Umber, Dacy Mormont, the Marndaily brothers. "We will ride for Lord Bolton's position. We will appear to be headed for the sellswords guarding the supply wagons, but then we turn and charge Tywine's reserve." "But do you think they will rush down to fight?" "They may wish to keep the high ground," Sir Stephen Free said. The other riverman nodded, wary of Lannister trickery. 5,000 men cannot sit on top of a hill forever. Sir Brynden will take the strongest fighters in the Riverlands, and as we charge from the west, the Blackfish will attack from the south. If Lannister bannermen see the Stark banner crossing the field, they will be tempted to engage the flank. If they meet us downhill, we will battle and the Blackfish will hit them in the rear. If they stay uphill, we attack from many sides, and pick off any stragglers," Robb said. Either way, he hoped to close with Lord Tywine. "Lord Stark, there is one problem. We can only cover the west and south. What if the Lord Tywine goes north to join his army?" Jason Mallister asked. He could retreat east as well, Robb thought. If he did though, and his bannermen saw the Lannister banner in flight, the Westermen had lost. The north would encircle Lord Lyden, Serret and Lefford, and smash them against Jon's wall. "I offer myself as a target." "That will lure the lion down," Robb said. He reached over to rubberboard Grey Wind. "We will hide behind that grassy knoll. Then when you ride to Lord Bolton, the reserve will not see us before it is too late," Sir Brynden said. He rode off, Lord Mallister, Mark Piper, Cale Vance, Stephen Free and John Osbracken following with their best men. "Stick a lance up Tywine's ass for me," the Great Jon yelled. Robb's trap worked better than he expected. As he rode with the Great Jon, and Harry on, the mounted soldiers in the reserve charged down to attack. Before they could clash, the Blackfish burst out of a copse of trees and smashed into the horses from the side. By then, the northern fighters turned to the east and continued the assault with overwhelming numbers. 4,000 northerners and 2,000 rivermen crushed the encircled cavalry. Less than 1,000 managed to retreat from the slaughter, fleeing north and east. That left Lord Tywine with a few hundred cavalry and 2,500 infantry. The combined forces of the north and the rivermen turned to the hill. The Old Lion stayed on the high ground, and Lannister men locked their kite shields together to form a wall, 10 men deep, stretching over 500 feet. Behind the wall of shields and spears, Tywine had placed his fiercest fighters as shock troops. As his men began to form lines, Robb and Grey Wind galloped hard in front of his leaders. "Hold! We cannot attack directly. Rushing into a wall of spears is for fools," Robb shouted. "But Lord Stark, Tywine Lannister is less than 1,000 feet away. And that monster, the Mountain, is with him," Jon Osbracken said. "You will follow orders," Robb said bluntly. "They are uphill. Some of our horse will charge, battle, and then pretend to retreat. Their men will pursue, and we will destroy them on the open field. But, we must stay disciplined. The retreat has to be convincing, but not real. If men charge too far forward or panic, they will be slaughtered. I will lead that attack, Lord Stark," Brynden Tully said. Robb accepted the offer. The Blackfish was a seasoned veteran and precise in his movements. Men would follow his orders in the heat of battle. The problem was that this tactic took time to execute, and on every other front, the Northern Army was outnumbered. Robb hoped that his forces could hold. Jon dispatched Chet to inform the Smalljan and Eddard. The burning watchtowers had attracted attention and several hundred Lannister spearmen and archers moved to exploit the weakness. They would be delayed by traps, the rampart and scaling the wall, but without defenders, the fortifications would soon fall. As he rushed west, Jon called on his men by name, urging them to lend troops. Outside the walls, the enemy soldiers made a desperate foray, throwing ladders and grappling hooks fixed to long poles. Some men even built crude ramps out of earth to allow them to get closer. Tully men poured in from the other side as well, and Jon urged them to concentrate on defending the walls. The battle turned desperate. If the defenders could hold their ground, the Westermen were sunk. But if sufficient numbers got past the wall, the greater numbers and better armor of the Westermen would win. For every assailant killed or pushed as they climbed a ladder or scaled the wall, another two came behind. The rampart began to fill with bodies. Soon, the ditch and the palisade would fall. On the wall, men dropped spears and bows for their swords. Ghost raced ahead and jumped into the fray with the hunting hounds. He snapped one bitch's neck in half and with his strong forelegs, broke the back of another. The hounds snarled, clawed and bit, but Ghost was too fast. He shot one man in the face, and threw the crossbow at another. Jon drew his bastard sword, killed the second man, and continued to Ramsay. Steelshanks intercepted him. The Bolton man wore a mail shirt but had strong steel over his long arms and legs. Jon blocked the vicious cut of the two-handed blade. He sliced back, but Steelshanks turned and the bastard sword only glanced off the heavy vambraces. Steelshanks struck again and again. The Bolton man had no protection for his head and neck, and with a hard thrust, Jon could cut through the mail shirt. But Jon, forced on the defensive, could not reach those vulnerable areas. The longer the fight continued, the more the strength and reach of the Bolton man mattered. Jon spotted a broken quarrel on the floor. He went down to his knees, switching the sword to his left hand. Steelshanks moved in for the kill, and Jon grabbed the bolt with his right and thrust the head hard through the mail links. 3 inches of the quarrel penetrated the padded gamison and Jon twisted. As the wounded Steelshanks fell, Jon stabbed his throat with the heavy tip of the bastard sword. When he stood up, a quarrel slammed into his breastplate. At 200 feet, the shot would have glanced off the heavy plate, but Ramsay was firing from point blank. Jon went down again to his knees and another bolt hit the left pauldron. The bolt had penetrated the shoulder, but the heavy metal dome absorbed some of the force. Ramsay cocked his crossbow once again. "Ah, the great Jon Snow. The most feared man in the north. I will flay your skin for a cloak. Or perhaps I will use your wolf. His fur would be warmer." Ramsay chuckled. "Did the Lannisters put you up to this? Or was it your father?" Jon said, trying to buy time as he groped for Steelshanks' dagger. "Wouldn't you like to know?" Ramsay lifted the crossbow and fired past Jon's shoulder. The small Janumber and Eddard Carstark had arrived, but they ducked as the quarrel hit the wood beams. To the west, John could hear Ed Muirtully rallying his men. An injured Ghost fought the remaining hounds. "Nothing you do matters now," Ramsay said, pointing to the bottom of the palisade. Two men with broken teeth and dirty faces were chopping a hole with axes. Soon, the Lannister men would burst through the fallen wall. "Your dire wolf killed some of my girls, but I can always replace bitches and boys." The bastard of Dreadfort smiled and knocked his crossbow. Then a howl, long and harrowing, came from the north. Nymeria could smell the dying horses from miles away. Her pack was hungry, but even a dire wolf feared hundreds of men with sharp sticks and metal claws. She thought of going north. North was the summer snows, the warmth of a little girl's bed, and the great forest where her brothers hunted when they were no longer pups. But then she sniffed the air and caught the scent. Her brother was close, somewhere over the water. Nymeria growled and her pack whined and then stood to follow. She dived into a muddy river, swimming swiftly to the other side. They ran through rills and brooks and turned south and west. The she-wolf saw a wooden wall, flames, and a dire wolf with thick white fur, red eyes and a bushy tail, her brother fighting with 3 ugly hounds. The bodies of 6 other dogs lay dead on the ground. Nymeria howled, and her pack howled with her. The she-wolf sprang at the closest brown bitch, and tore off a front leg cleanly at the shoulder. Ghost rushed and his jaw clamped on the neck of another hound. Ramsay turned his crossbow to the dire wolves, but John jumped up and grabbed him by the waist. As John slammed him to the ground, Ramsay fired, the bolt ripping through the armor on John's right arm. The many folds of steel riveted together to form the vambrace and gauntlet absorbed some force, but the bolt had still lodged into his upper arm. John grabbed the unloaded crossbow and bludgeoned the ugly face into blood and broken bones. He locked his steel gauntlets about the meaty neck and heard a loud and satisfying snap as Ramsay died. John slammed a dagger through the right eye to be certain. Behind him, the dire wolves had finished the last hound. John stood up to see small Janumber, Eddard Carstark, Ed Muirtully, and Brynden Blackwood holding off a swarm of Lannister swordsmen. The Bolton men had weakened the fortifications and the wall was about to fall. Dozens of Westermen surged up into the palisade. Ghost slinked to his side, wounded but still determined. A fierce dire wolf with golden eyes accompanied him, and she boldly rubbed her muzzle against his injured arm. 100 of her little grey cousins prowled behind. Wolves, he did not have enough men, but he had wolves, and they wanted to be led. John turned to them, and howled. Nymeria sang, and wolf after wolf joined the chorus, as the pack bonded and prepared to pounce. Then Ghost, the wolf with no voice, led the attack, hundreds of fierce beasts snarling and biting at Lannister men. The wolf pack killed without mercy. John reached out for the ravens. There were hundreds of ravens, and thousands of crows, carrion birds looking to feast. John pushed his mind and he soared into the air, his mind seeing not from one set of eyes, but dozens, then hundreds, then even more. He could see from 1,000 eyes, crows, ravens, a white dire wolf, even his own. Some Westermen still attempted to scale the walls, pressing the exhausted defenders hard. Many lay dead or dying on the field. John reached out and a vast cloud of birds abandoned their roosts. They swooped down, attacking with talons and beaks, pecking at eyes and fingers. A giant conspiracy of ravens and crows flew from the palisade, and turned the sky black, and day into night. Maester, Maester. Chet and his crew had driven several teams of horses pulling the ballistas to this part of the wall. A strange silence fell over the Wintertown boys. "What is wrong?" John asked. "Your eyes, milord. They are milk white," Geryon said. "Enough. Bring the Caro ballista to me," John said. The crews maneuvered the weapons into place. With the Lannisters packed so close outside, each bolt killed multiple men, often pinning 3 or 4 men together in their death throes. The area near the wall was cleared. John looked over the field, as the small Jon, Carstark and the rivermen gasped for breath. All over the battleground, Westermen broke and fled, spooked by dark wings and the howl of wolves. Battle standards were abandoned as the enemy turned tail and fled for the river in panic. "Snow, have we won?" the small Jon asked. John grabbed a bloody bastard sword. "Not yet, Umber. We have more men to kill." Bodies were piled next to the wooden logs that the Westermen had used to cross the rampart. John walked across, with Ghost and Nymeria at his side. The traps between the wall and water-filled trench had been triggered, and the path that the soldiers used to assault the palisade could be easily followed. The air was heavy and foul with the smell of death. The soldiers and horses slain had already begun to rot, and there were still pockets of the injured and dying left on the northern side of the Red Fork. The Lannisters had failed to breach the wall. John motioned to the defenders on the wall. His exhausted troops, perhaps 1,500 men, came down to the field. The wolf pack followed Ghost and Nymeria, and the dire wolves followed John as he marched to the river, accompanied by swarms of ravens and crows. The wolves killed the wounded Lannister men and horses. The Winter Town boys carefully drove the ballistas down over makeshift bridges and trails marked in blood until they reached the trident. They had few bolts left, but that was enough. The river was 500 feet wide. The fighting was still fierce on the southern side near the river. John could make out 3 standards, a white badger, a golden pile, and a blue peacock. House Leiden, House Lefford and House Seret were still standing, fighting on the river road. The Wintertown boys opened fire again, aiming at knights near those banners. Men and horses were impaled on barbed bolts, and the lines began to break. John marched over the trident, wolves and ravens at his side, his men following. The howl of wolves and the croaks of the ravens filled the air, as Lannister men fled from the bloody wolf and his sorceress minions. Robb Stark paused as he heard the howling of 100 wolves. Grey Wind howled back, and Robb saw flocks of blackbirds, like a portent of death, pass over the Red Fork. With 2 feigned retreats, his men had broken the shield wall, but Lord Tywine and his guards were nowhere to be found. The sellswords and green boys had long vanished, leaving hundreds of supply wagons. "Where is Tywine?" Robb asked. The Blackfish shook his head. "He has fled south and east. The rivermen almost had him, but the mountain and several knights fended off Lord Bracken and Lord Mallister. The old lion had abandoned the field. When that news spread, the Westerman army would break." Robb called to his battle guard. "Lord Tywine has fled." "What in the 7 hells is that?" Great Yonumber said, pointing to the dark wings in the sky. Robb was certain this was his brother's doing. "Victory. We ride north. My brother is the anvil. We are the hammer. Let us break the Lannister army." Robb and the Blackfish combined forces, and rode north to the river. There was little resistance left as enemy soldiers surrendered or ran. Grey Wind saw his brother first, and ran to the injured Ghost and a dire wolf with grey fur and golden eyes. Jon Snow was at the head of his men, the shafts of 3 quarrels protruding through the armor at his chest, shoulder, and right arm. He was drenched in blood, helmet, armor, and sword. With wolves and ravens at his side, his brother looked like an old god of the north, ready to accept a sacrifice of blood and entrails under a weirwood tree. He smiled and raised his arm in salute. "Lord Stark, victory is yours." Author's notes. People did use caltrops in the ancient and Middle Ages, but their effectiveness varied. Against war chariots, that needed a level surface, they were quite effective, to the point that nobody used war chariots anymore. But the mobility of horses is an important factor. Good riders got around caltrops. Further, they can track the person using them. There were battles where caltrops were released and backfired. In A Feast for Crows, Sir Davin Lannister offers to forage for Tywine. Lord Lannister refuses, saying that some tasks are fit for lions, but foraging is best left for goats, Vargo Hoat, and dogs, Gregor Clegane. A lord may love the men he commands, but he cannot be a friend to them. One day, he may need to sit in judgment on them, or send them forth to die. I believe these are Jon Snow's words in A Dance with Dragons. He is quoting Ned Stark. Nymeria slaughters 4 bloody mummers who are hunting for Arya after she flees is Arya's first POV chapter in A Storm of Swords. The wolf pack is going north on the same trail that Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie take. The model for Jon's fortification is from the Battle of Elisa. It is not the full battle, Caesar builds double walls and fights on 2 fronts. But the quality of engineering from Elisa is unmatched in ancient warfare. The extent sounds crazy, but in Elisa, Caesar built 2 sets of circular walls, one 11 miles long, the other 14 miles. He built over 200 watchtowers and his multiple ditches surrounded the entire city. He had the larger army, 50,000 Romans, but he built everything in 3 weeks, and he built deeper and wider. He was fighting 4 times his number. John's wall is 2 miles, and the flanks guarded by the rivers. Using the same proportions as the Romans, John would build a watchtower every 80 meters, or 40 towers. The Battle of Elisa is an extraordinary display of martial superiority. It is a tribute to the training, discipline, and technological edge of the Romans and Caesar's brilliance. There are debates about how far arrows can shoot, but the archers at the Battle of Crecy could shoot 300 yards. In comparison, the range of the Roman ballista was 500 yards, although it would be used at closer distances for greater accuracy. Note that the North is shooting from an elevated platform which would extend their range and shorten the enemy's. Cross-section ditches more than a meter deep have been long recognized as especially defensive. Their surface width, depth, steep sides, and narrow bottoms make them very difficult for attackers to negotiate. Romans had a special name for them, fossae fastigatae, sloped or pointed ditches. The ditches at Elisa were 15 to 20 feet deep, and they extended much further than 2 miles. Caesar's army also built on both sides in a matter of weeks. In the Battle of Crecy, the French hired Genoa crossbowmen. Their bowstrings got wet and they were completely annihilated by the English longbowmen who kept their strings dry. Wet strings reduce both range and accuracy. "Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake" is a quote from Napoleon Bonaparte. While he was shit at naval combat and got burned in Russia, Napoleon was a great general. As for the missile weapons, there is range and there is range. An English bowman might be able to shoot 400 yards. But he probably couldn't kill much from that distance. The ballista could shoot 300 to 400 yards, but John waits until the enemy is very close, under 150 yards, and then fires. This is the equivalent of the shoot when you see the whites of their eyes. Some writers claim a Roman ballista could be shot 1,000 times a day. If you assume no night shooting, that implies the crew fired 1 bolt a minute for 16 hours. That is a lot of ammo. Then we will fight in the shade. This is a nod to the 300, Sparta fighting the Persians. Rob's initial strategy is from the Battle of Leuctra. In 400 BC, the Spartan phalanx was the undisputed champion. Normally a phalanx is 8 to 12 men deep, and the Greeks put their strongest fighters on the right. This is because due to the nature of shields covering the left, the phalanx drifted leftward in battle. At Leuctra, Epaminondas was the Theban general. He didn't have enough soldiers, so he made his line thin, but on his left, stacked his best infantry 50 men deep. Thus, the elite warriors of Thebes faced the Spartan king and his guard directly. Epaminondas gambled he would destroy the Spartan right before the enemy could flank and kill his weaker men. He won. That is Rob's strategy as well, to attack Tywin's reserve directly. With enough time, the Lannister forces could beat his men, but Robb thinks the others can hold out for long enough for him to win. When Robb meets Tywin uphill, he shifts tactics. In the Battle of Hastings, William the Conqueror has mostly cavalry while the English, mostly infantry, are uphill in a shield wall. The Normans feigned retreats to break the cohesion of the shield wall. So it actually did work in history. But it was by no means easy. Historians believe William the Conqueror executed the feigned retreat twice, luring the English from the high ground. The most famous practitioner is Genghis Khan, but that makes sense given Mongol horses and archery. One tidbit, only the last 100 yards would be a full-speed charge. So when Bracken says he is less than 1,000 feet away, what he means is that we only need to trot for a bit, and then bam, we can hit the wall. John O's wants to attack the mountain. People could argue that John should have realized Ramsay was a Bolton or killed him earlier. Maybe, but in an army of thousands with the help of Roose Bolton, he can hide easily. He did it in the north many times, fooling Theon, Roderick Castle, etc. John's control of the wolves and ravens is an emergency thing. He goes nova in an adrenaline rush. He can't possibly sustain 1,000 eyes without going batshit insane. Ballista in the open field also would not normally work. Cavalry would swarm and kill the crews. It happens here, only because the battle is almost won and the artillery is delivering a knockout blow. The hammer and anvil comment is from the Battle of Redgrass Field. There, Prince Baelor, not the Blessed, was the hammer and Prince Maker was the anvil. Of course, GRM points out it was Bloodraven who won the battle by killing Demon Blackfear, but as a sorcerer and bastard, he receives only scorn as a kinslayer and not the glory of victory. Jon is accompanied by 2 wolves and ravens. He looks like Odin, only with a sword and not a spear. I know the old gods are supposed to be tree spirits, but in my opinion, the gods of the north would be similar to the Germanic versions. Or maybe Jon looks like the stranger. Chapter 22, The Slow Knife. Chapter text. The Slow Knife. Are all Northmen as pieded as you? Talisa said. The healer from Volantis meant well, but the 3 crossbow bolts had been cut out of his body. Removing the quarrel that pierced the chest was difficult. The wound had to be enlarged and deepened, so that Talisa could remove the bolt head with a pair of small and hollow tongs. Jon washed the wounds with a mixture of white wine, honey and vinegar, and after checking that no dirt or metal remained, wrapped bandages of linen and flax around his shoulder, right arm, and chest. He would use wine and soft sponges to keep the dressings moist. Not all Northmen, but we are Starks, Robb said, as he walked into the tent. His battle companions, drawn from the high-born heirs of the North and the Rivermen, stayed outside, exchanging raucous war stories and well-deserved slaps on the back. Jon did not need guards. 3 direwolves sprawled near him, curled up together and resting after the battle, and a large meal of honeyed chicken and a haunch of roast goat. Lady Talisa, I thank you for your concern, but I am well enough to rise. Jon grimaced. He stood up and chewed a large slug of white willow bark. Ghost perked up his ears. You were badly injured. Had the bolts hit bone, you may have lost an arm or worse, she said. But they didn't, and I haven't. I won't rest when I can save lives. Jon said. The healer stomped out in frustration, stuffing linen dressings into the doeskin bag with hands flecked with blood. Jon frowned. She should really wash her hands first. She is a spirited one, Robb said, looking at her slim figure with admiration. Jon rolled his eyes. She is a good healer. Bit bossy, though. He rubbed the white wolf's thick fur, and Ghost and Nymeria nipped playfully at Jon's uninjured left arm. Grey Wind sniffed and maintained a regal air. Robb turned serious. Smalljan says he fought off 3 Lannister men at the same time. That saboteurs led by Ramsay Dustin tried to bring down the wall. That number will grow larger in the retelling. Smalljan, Eddard Carstark, Brynden Blackwood and Ed Muirtully all fought well, else Ramsay would have succeeded. Ramsay is no Dustin. He is a Bolton, and his men and hounds come from the Dread Fort. Jon said. When I asked whether his father or the Lannisters sent him, he only smirked. But how do you know? We have never seen Ramsay with Roose Bolton, Robb said. Steelshanks is a Bolton man. And Ramsay has the same small cold pale eyes. Jon said. Lord Bolton pushed me into attacking the supply wagons. Only a few thousand sellswords guarded the train, but it was a clever trap. The reserve and other Westerman riders would have flanked us, Robb said. How did the Lannisters send messages to Lord Bolton? Jon shrugged. I do not know, but what will you do with Roose Bolton? What can I do? There is no real proof. Attacking the wagons, and splitting the Lannister army in half was reasonable. I would not blame any of my commanders for the attempt. And Steelshanks is a single man. We need more to bring a great lord to justice, Robb said. Bolton is a danger. His son wanted my skin for a cloak. His men are scum and the hounds are vicious beasts. The son is a shadow of the father, Jon said. We cannot kill him offhand, Jon, not without proof. Father always said the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. I am not ready, even if we should, Robb said. Bolton will not swing a sword, or at least not from the front, Jon thought. He will betray us, Robb. We should let him. What is your plan? Robb asked. Roose Bolton is a clever man. We are not likely to catch him with a raven to Tywine. Let him make contact with the Lannisters. What he knows, Tywine will know. We can use that. We can prepare for his betrayal. A knife in the front is better than a knife in the back, Jon said. 2,000 of our men are Boltons. And hundreds more Ryswells and Dustins. Rob said. We do not know if those houses are traitors as well. We should separate Roose Bolton from any potential allies. Have you sent riders to pursue the Lannisters? Jon asked. Rob shook his head. The Blackfish and I commanded almost all the cavalry. The feigned retreat worked, but it was not easy. Many men were injured, it took a great deal of time, and the horses are exhausted. The men and the horses need rest. Send Roose Bolton to pursue. If he actually kills any Lannisters, that would help. But if he doesn't, he will betray our plans to Lord Tywine. Keep House Ryswell and House Dustin here, and watch their commanders closely. Jon said. We can ill afford to lose 2,000 men. Rob lamented. You have lost them already. Would you trust Roose Bolton at your back in battle? Jon said. We need to accept that we have been betrayed. Only then, can we make them pay. Rob nodded, and called Grey Wind to his side. I have to speak to the lords, to see how great our losses were. We need to know how many men the Lannisters have left. Send the injured to me. I will save as many as possible, and then speak to the prisoners, Jon said. The brothers left the tent, and their dire wolves followed. It was well past midnight when the Wintertown boys announced that every last bit of herbs, from Kingskipper to Sourlead to Willowbark, had been depleted. There was still boiling wine and a dozen bottles of vinegar left for emergencies, but the honey, mustard seeds, and nettle were gone, along with the crushed aloe, the comfrey paste and the penna oil leaves. Jon had sent messengers to every holdfast, village, and hall within 10 miles, proclaiming the northern victory and asking that any medicine or healers be sent. They had done yeoman's work that night tending to injured Northmen, Rivermen and Westermen, but there was nothing left. They would have to wait until more supplies were delivered in the morning. Giant vats of bone broth simmered in the open. A covered portico held several large fire pits and outdoor ovens to bake bread and roast meat. Prisoners dug public latrines. Men from both armies had been drafted to dig graves. The rank smell of so many men was overwhelming, even without the multitude of corpses. Snow. What are you doing with the bodies of our companions? Strongbow yelled. Even in chains, the Cricker whole night still blustered. The bald fat man next to him only cowered. Lord Prester and Lord Lydon sat quietly, watched by a dozen armed Winterfell guards. Burying them. Otherwise the stink will be even worse. Jon said. What about the Silent Sisters? They prepare the dead for a proper burial. Lord Prester said. Your men raped septars and burnt down septs. There are no Silent Sisters in these parts of the Riverlands. The bodies will decompose and carry disease. And if it rains, the smell will spread over everything. The graves are shallow. If you wish, you can return here after the war, exhume the bodies, and bring them home. Jon said. The Westerman digested that information. So you do not mean to kill us? Or starve us and feed us to the wolves? Or torture us and then kill us? Lord Prester said. That depends. Who is responsible for the carnage in the Riverlands? Who burned the fields and sacked the towns? Who killed and raped women and children? Jon said. It was not us, Snow. I swear it on my house and my dead mother's soul. My men and I would not stoop to that. The Strongbow said. Lord Tywine released his goats and dogs. Gregor Clegane's men, Vargo Hoat and his freeriders, Amory Lork, those are the scum who committed the crimes. Lord Prester said. Then they will be hanged, every one of them. If I had more time, I would make them suffer. Where are they? These men that you blame for the crimes of the Lannister army. Jon said. You killed most of the Mountain's men. He brought over 1,000, and came back with less than 200 from the Red Fork. The Strongbow said. Lord Tywine was greatly wroth. His SWYFT squeaked. One half of the freeriders are here. Hoat and Lork were told to hold Harrenhal in Lord Tywine's name. And as for the Mountain's men, they crossed the Red Fork again for the battle. I doubt more than a few dozen survived. Maybe less. Lord Prester said. You will give them to me for execution. All of them will die for their crimes. And if I find that you lied, I will hang your knights. 10 of yours for each one you refuse to surrender. And I will find out. Chet, take SWYFT to look over the prisoners. When he finishes, take Cricker Hall next, and then Prester and Leiden. Bring every captured lord to look for these men. John said. Some are injured, sir, and resting. Lord Leo Lefford broke both his arm and leg when he fell. Lord Robin Morland lost an eye. Clydas said. He will lose another if he refuses. Get them up. By the morning, I want all the scum delivered to me. Or I will serve their justice to the highborn. John said. John left to get rest, with Ghost and Nymeria at his side. Outside his tent, wolves crouched and tucked their tails as the dire wolves passed. He slept deeply and dreamed of dragons. The men loudly ordered drinks and food, and the innkeep, potboy and serving maids rushed to bring out jacks of ale and bowls of beef and bacon stew. The unlucky hog, a few miles from Bitterbridge, bustled with activity as 24 gold cloaks armed with black mail armor, iron cudgels and iron spears jested and japed. Boasts of fighting prowess filled the common room. The noise covered a quiet conversation in a small private room upstairs. Petter Baelish covered his elegant plum-colored doublet with a plain blue cloak. 2 fighters stood guard near the door, out of whispering range. One was an imposing giant of 6'6" with brown hair, a hooked nose, and a trimmed beard. The other was stocky and more plain-looking with nappy grey hair and a squashed nose. Lothar Brune, quiet and middle-aged, was a more skilled sword than Asmund Kettleblack but did not look it. Petter sat with 2 men. One was garbed in white robes with a small crystal dangling on a fat neck and the other dressed in brown homespun of a penitent, but the manicured hands showed no signs of begging. With a smile, Baelish took out a plain bag with 6 tiny purple crystals. The Strangler. You will find Renly Baratheon at Bitterbridge. Given him the gift. His arm and his chest throbbed with pain when John woke up. He had dreamt of a black dragon, so great that an entire horse could ride down its gullet and be swallowed whole. The riverlands were burning from dragon flame, and nobles and small-born round panicked from the terror on the Trident. You are a dragon, the voice whispered. A dragon does not fear. He broke his fast with 2 soft-boiled eggs. Nymeria and Ghost still slept, their backs together, and John wondered if the 2 had wolf dreams. With care, he strapped the bastard sword to his left side, and a dagger to the right. He studied 2 lists, one with the dead, and the second prisoners. A score would be valuable hostages, several dozens more were knights and second sons, but a vast number of prisoners were small folk. The bulk of the Lannister knights had crossed the river under Sir Adam Marbrand, and died charging the ballista. Their bodies would be stripped of armor, weapons, and valuables and buried in the trenches. John stepped out into the open air, with 2 yawning dire wolves. 3 large poles, hammered into grass, supported a sturdy horizontal wooden triangle, 15 feet up in the air. Nooses were already thrown over each of the legs, and dangled 8 feet in the air. 4 carts packed with tied-up prisoners were guarded by the Winter Town boys and Tully men. A crowd of small folk had gathered, ready for the hanging. Please, sir. We were only following orders. The speaker was an old stoop-shouldered man with cracked yellow teeth. His right arm, crushed from a stone hurled from a catapult, was still encased in mail. He is a liar. A woman screamed. They tortured my boy. They cut off his fingers with knives before he died. She pointed to a man of medium height and build with an ordinary face. The man was entirely forgettable except for cold dead eyes. "My they deserve to suffer worse than hanging. They raped my daughter," a burly man said. "You may be correct, but death is the normal punishment." John's eyes narrowed. After surrendering, the prisoners had been put in chains or bound with rope. Bows, spears and swords had been taken away, but some still had knives. One carried a small slender blade with Mitken's mark on the hilt. John drew needle from the grey scabbard. When he was 8, this had been his first sword, and now it seemed only a thin stiletto. "Where did you get this?" He directed the question to a bald, stocky man with big ears and a large jaw with black bristles. "I took it from a boy we captured. Only it turned out to be a girl," Poliver said. "And where is this boy or girl now?" John said. "Ran away from Harrenhal." The man shrugged. "You can have the blade if you want, sir. It is not yours to give." John felt Nymeria's hot anger, but these were scum, and not worthy of attention. It was their masters that he wanted to bring to heel. The mountain's men were like Ramses' hounds, frothing dogs that deserved to die. Jon motioned to the small folk. I will not allow torture, but these men killed your friends and family. The quicker they die, the better. You may help hang them. Grim men eagerly came forward. In but a moment, dozens of necks were broken and the bodies thrown into an unmarked mass grave to be forgotten. A large map of West Aos draped over a fine walnut table, both scavenged from a Lannister wagon. Silver stags marked 3 locations: King's Landing, the site of the battle, and River Run. The lords and commanders crowded the tent, but they made a path for the 2 direwolves and Jon Snow. Robb was surrounded by the Tullys, his lady mother, the Blackfish, and Sir Ed Muir. Robb motioned for Sir Brynden to begin. We had 17,000 men going into the battle. We have 2,000 dead, but another 2,000 injured. It will take weeks for them to fully recover. Lord Tywine had over 25,000. We count over 11,000 dead, half north of the Red Fork, and 1,500 prisoners, the Blackfish said. So even after our victory, the Lannister army is as large as ours. Robb grimaced. The Lannisters also have many injured. Men did not flee unscathed. Lord Mallister argued. The sellswords and freeriders may have abandoned them. They had over 2,000 at the battle. The Blackfish said. Enough of these numbers. Shall we march for King's Landing? The Great Jon said. The Lord of the Last Hearth wanted things plain and simple. What is the strength of the Crown lands? Are they loyal to the Lannisters? Jon asked. He referred to the lands that stretched from Maidenpool to the Stormlands. There were many settlements and holdfasts, but by people, the Crown lands were based around Blackwater Bay, with the 2 ports of Duskendale and King's Landing. Stannis raised a few thousand men, but in the past, the mainland lords could call armies of more than 5,000. The Lannisters have not called these banners, yet. The lands are so close that they will not rebel against the throne. The Blackfish said. The prisoners say the Iron Throne has recruited more gold cloaks to defend King's Landing. The men in the City Watch have swelled from 2,000 to 5,000. The Lannisters may use that to strengthen their forces, but I doubt if new recruits are well trained. There would be many sellswords as well in the capital. Jon said. King's Landing is 4 days' ride, but we do not have the men. In time, the Lannister army will reassemble. And with the bannermen in the Crown lands, their numbers will grow again. We cannot take the city. Robb said. Lord Stark, we have beaten longer odds before. Daisy Mormont said. Yes, but not in a siege. King's Landing has thick walls and the Red Keep is a strong castle. Robb said. We need to scout ahead. Lord Bolton, take your men into the Crown lands. If you find pockets, give battle. If you find the main host, then send a messenger back. Lord Stark, I will do so, but if our army does not have enough men, how will that change? Roose Bolton whispered. I will determine that, my lord. For now, I want the army to heal. And I intend to control the River Road, the King's Road and the High Road. Robb said. Jon wondered what else Robb was leaving unsaid. His brother clearly did not want to show all his plans to the Liege Lord. Nymeria prodded Grey Wind, and the 3 direwolves left the tent. Nymeria was eager to run, and Jon would follow. Arya woke up to the hungry cries of children. The inn at the crossroads swarmed with them, boys and girls, whose parents were dead, missing, or had simply left. There had been 100 little houses in the village nearby where crofters scratched out a small life on farms and raising sheep for wool and milk. Those farms had been burnt down, and the sheep eaten. Life was better at the inn than the abandoned houses. Here, they had a little to eat, donations from a wandering brother handing out sacks of seeds, oaten porridge, flour and barley bread. The Septon visited once a week, a big man, 6 feet tall, even hunched over, large leathery hands with dirt under the nails and black horned feet. He walked shoeless, with a quarterstaff, and his donkey carried the food. If Arya's brain was not muddled by hunger and fear, she might have wondered how a Septon with a donkey could evade Lannister foragers. Yesterday, the pushy 10-year-old Willow and her suspicious older sister Jane, ordered that no fires be lit. The Heddles had gotten wind of the battle, and the inn was locked up tight, with no lights and no noise. They ate cold porridge and stale bread, huddled in darkness with a few crossbows ready. In the night, horses galloped by without stopping, and Arya saw Lannister colors in the dark. When she closed her eyes, she tasted meat and felt warmth, two sensations missing from the inn at the crossroads. She dreamt of wolves dancing and singing that night. Breakfast that morning was a thin gruel, tiny barley groats boiled in water. Bits of brown cabbage and red beets floated in her wooden bowl. Even in her hunger, Arya disliked beets. There will be dead horses from the fighting. We could sneak out, and get horse meat. I could roast it under the coals. No one would even see a fire. Hot Pie said. And what if you get caught? You might lead them back to this inn. Jane Heddle snapped. We don't know if the battle is over. Or who has won. Gendry said. My brothers will win, Arya thought stubbornly. In the past week, she had wanted to cross the 5 miles to the Red Fork. There were thousands of Westermen patrolling, and travelers said that all the bridges were flooded or guarded. She swallowed a spoonful of bitter gruel. A little boy, half naked, ran into the common room, gasping for breath. Pate, what are you doing outside? It could be dangerous. Willow scolded. I saw them. Coming near the river, he said. Willow was about to ask more, but then the howl of wolves answered. The girl rushed to close the door, but the howling became louder. Grey shapes darted around the inn, and they would hear snarling and snapping. Arya could see several dozen figures, grey and black and tawny brown, hidden in shadows and behind trees. Pate screamed and ran upstairs. Gendry reached both his hands for his warhammer. The heavy iron head had a long spike on the back. The Heddles wound their crossbows and aimed out the windows. Hot Pie shook in fear and gulped down his bowl of gruel. The wolves went silent. Then hoofbeats could be heard amid the whinny of horses. Riders dismounted outside, heavily armored men with swords and axes. They ignored the wolves around them. The door swung open. A loud boisterous voice with the distinctive accent of the north cried out. Drop the crossbow, girl. A smoke-grey dire wolf, lean and as tall as a small horse, strutted into the common room. Hard yellow eyes looked around until it saw her. Then a huge grey dire wolf with an white belly jumped through an open window. Hot Pie squeaked and dove under a table. Arya stepped forward, trembling and unsure. The last dire wolf appeared suddenly at her side, white as snow, with hard garnet eyes. She had never even heard the white wolf sneak behind her. Arya Stark. The speaker was young but still a man grown, with a long face, dark brown hair, and eyes so brown they looked black. He wore all black over his mail, but there was a white dire wolf emblazoned over his heart. Arya ran and jumped into the waiting arms of Jon Snow. He embraced her tightly, like he would never let her go. Arya was surprised that tears rolled down her face. After the horrors of the last few months, she had forgotten she could still cry. Jon held her as several others, men, a tall woman, and older boys, walked into the room. When he finally let her go, the Heddles knelt on the floor and a wary Gendry placed the warhammer down, and stepped in front of a cowering Hot Pie. My lord. Welcome to the inn at the crossroads, the older Heddle girl stammered. Why are you kneeling? Jon interrupted. We don't want to offend you, Sir Snow. Lord Snow. Willow said, keeping her head firmly bowed and eyes on the ground. This must be how Robb feels all the time. Jon jested. Rise. This is my brother, Jon Snow. Arya said. And Jon, these are Gendry and Hot Pie. They helped me escape Harrenhal. Hot Pie's eyes popped and he looked ready to faint on the dirty floor. The Heddles turned hopeful. Then Ghost snorted, and sniffed from the young Heddle to a spot near the stairs. What's under there? Jon asked, not unkindly. The older Heddle gulped and then lifted the trapdoor. Children crept out, ragged boys with unshorn locks and furtive girls, ready to skitter. A few young ones sobbed when they saw the armed men and the dire wolves. Others were silent as they waited their fate. How many children are at this inn? Jon asked. 50, my lord. Some are hiding upstairs in the rooms. Willow said. How long have you been running the inn? 4 moons, my lord. Willow said. Her brother looked at the two heddles deep in thought. Have them come out. Every one. They poured out of the nooks, alcoves and crannies. Arya had never seen all of them in one place. There was not enough food, and it had to be carefully rationed to last a week or longer. She was older than most in the room, and unlike the other children, her bones did not stick out. Hunger could be seen in their legs and arms, protruding ribs, and sunken faces. A boy with a cowlick wrapped thin arms about his chest, as if he was bracing for a beating. Please sir, don't eat us. A burly man with wild reddish-brown hair roared in laughter. And why would we do that? You are all skin and bones. Ben means the wolves. Gendry said. The wolves stuffed their bellies with Lannister men. The big man grinned. The tall lanky woman shook her head. Arya admired the spiked steel morning star at her belt. Smalljan, you are scaring the children. I am Daisy Mormont. This idiot here is Smalljan Umber. And this is Eddard Karstark, Darren Hornwood, and Brynden and Hoster Blackwood. I am also known as the Catapult, the man said, smiling. What will happen to us, my lady? Willow asked quietly. The White Wolf will decide. We defeated the Lannister forces yesterday. You will not be harmed. Daisy said. She signaled to Tully guards, and they brought in saddlebags of dried meat and hard bread. Jon spoke softly to a sharp-eyed boy, who quickly left the inn to ride away. Come on, sister. Let's get some fresh air. Wolves are happier outside, he said. Arya stepped into the courtyard. Several dozen men wearing Tully or Winterfell colors patrolled the perimeter of the inn, and their horses grazed next to all three roads. Grey Wind trotted fierce and proud, and Ghost roved silently next to his brother. Nymeria walked her own path, the she-wolf not deigning to look at Arya. Do you think she will ever forgive me? I had to throw rocks to drive her away. I hit her twice and she whined before she ran. Arya said sadly. Jon turned from his horse. There is nothing to forgive, Arya. You chased her away so she would live. Nymeria saved me yesterday at the wall. And she found you this morning. She is yours and you are hers. He handed her a sword in a worn grey scabbard. Arya drew the slender blade out with wonder. Needle. But how? The mountain's men took it. The mountain lives, but I killed most of his men across the Red Fork. I hung the few that were left, and I took your sword back. Jon said. He sat down on a bench, Ghost and Grey Wind playing at his feet. Above, ravens croaked and caught. Now tell me everything, about King's Landing and your escape. As Arya began to spin her tale, the grey she-wolf approached and nuzzled her side. Arya spoke for a long time, her brother listening. Jon Snow had a rare ability to concentrate, and he absorbed her words without interruption. After she finished, he asked about the two men she heard plotting underneath the Red Keep and the exact words said at father's execution. Her brother examined Jaqen H'gar's iron coin, and then used a parchment to trace the worn-down words and image, before returning it to her. Arya, Braavos is known for the Iron Bank and the Faceless Men. This is their coin. Jon said. Do you know about them? Arya said. No one does. They are from ancient Valyria, and these words are Valar Morghulis and Valar Doris. All men must die and all men must serve. The price for their aid is very high, more than sane men dare pay, he said. I don't want to be weak. I want to kill them all. Cersei, Joffrey, Meryn Trant, the Hound, Sir Gregor, Eileen Payne. Make me a water dancer and a wolf and not afraid, ever again. Arya said. You are not weak, Arya. You have survived so much. We will get revenge for father. I should have given Tywin Lannister as a name to Jaqen. This stupid war would be over. Robb and I both want that. But we would rather have you alive than Lord Tywin dead. Jon mussed her hair and they sat together with the direwolves in comfortable silence, until a large covered wagon rumbled into the yard, pulled by a team of drays. Let's go back to the inn. They entered to raucous laughter. Smalljan Umber and Eddard Karstark stood on a long table, heads bumping against the roof, making great sweeping gestures with a great sword and axe. Several Wintertown crew pretended to attack, flailing helplessly against the two beefy warriors. Some boys wore wooden bowls as helmets and could barely see, or were turned sideways. "What is going on?" Jon asked. "Small Jon is reenacting the Battle of the Three Wolves, and how he defended the wall against Lannister men," Daisy said. "Only half a dozen. I thought the Small Jon said it was a score." Jon said. "Karstark and I had to save a few for the Rivermen," Umber cried. Brynden Blackwood scoffed. He and Hoster had better sense than to climb a rickety table. The door opened, and the smell of fresh bread wafted through the inn. Chet carried loaves in both hands, and men rolled casks and hefted sacks. "Maester Snow. We took some fresh bread from the ovens. And the wagon has wheat flour, barley, bacon, poppy oil, dried beef, butter, wheels of cheese, dried fish, and sacks of onions, carrots, nuts, and beans. We even have a small pot of salt," Chet said. "We brought barrels of wine and ale too, Maester," Clydas said. "I will take those, lads," Small Jon said, looking for mugs and jacks behind the counter. "Can we have some food, sir?" Willow Heddle asked. "The food is all for you, to feed the children at the inn. You took Arya in, even when you did not know her name. And for that, you have my thanks," Jon said to the wide-eyed children. "Your inn is under my protection. If anyone threatens you, inform me. And if anyone hurts you, I will make that person pray for a quick death. I can bake bread. I know how to mill grain and knead dough. I can fire the oven and make the bread rise, my lord," Hot Pie said. The Heddles looked at the fat boy skeptically. Arya stepped forward. "His name is Hot Pie. He would know how to bake." Jane Heddle nodded immediately. "Of course, my lady. Whatever you wish. If you sit down, we would be happy to serve a meal." She gave a low curtsy. Hot Pie went back to the kitchen, and Jane Heddle oversaw the unloading of many barrels and sacks. Willow yelled at the children, and they pushed tables together to form 3 long rows. Some boys ran to get benches and chairs, while others carried heavy pails of water from the well. Some water went into the kitchen, but all the children were directed to wash up at a basin. The inn at the crossroads, moribund even that morning, burst into life. Arya sat next to Jon as he discussed orders. The she-bear would travel east on the Trident with many guards to make certain the Lannisters did not control the waterway and the Bay of Crabs. Karstark and Small Jon would go the same route, but they would secure Solpans first, and then join Daisy at Maidenpool. Hornwood and the Blackwoods would go north, to make sure the lands around House Dare were clear of bandits. Pork pies, root soup, oatcakes, and skewers of meat and onions emerged from the kitchen. Arya devoured a round of bread, stuffed with sizzling bacon, and the children fell on the food like starving wolves. Hot Pie's bread was delicious. After the lunch, Arya would ride west with Jon to find Robb and her mother. In all the excitement, she did not notice a large raven who nested near the inn, in plain sight of the common room. The lemon cakes went untouched as Lady Aelary tried and failed to calm down a distraught Loras. The Night of Flowers raged, and the Tyrells wisely sent away the Maesters and the Septons to a far corner of Bitterbridge Castle. Renly Baratheon died last night with splotches on his eyes and neck, a black tongue, and a purple face. When Archmaester Ibros was summoned in the morning, the healer could not understand how Renly choked to death, but the Septons attributed the death to sorcery and the Red Witch. Garlan and Willers watched with concern as Margaery soothed her brother. The Tyrells were a close-knit family, and the plight of the youngest pained his siblings. His love, deep, pure, and childlike, had turned to despair. Only love could bring such pain. "I would kill Stannis 1,000 times to bring Renly back," Loras cried. "Hush. They say that Stannis prepares to leave Storm's End to make his way to Dragonstone." She held his head in her arms, like a babe. "To be brought down by a Red Witch from Ass High. All plans lose to magic," Olenna said bitterly. Lady Aelary took her son away, leaving the other Tyrells. "Grandmother, Petter Baelish has sent another messenger. He is 5 miles away on the Rose Road. We have already delayed for several days," Willers said. "How many men does he have with him?" Olenna asked. 2 dozen. Gold cloaks from King's Landing, and Baelish claims that he is an envoy of the Iron Throne," Willers said. Why do we need to see this co-encounter? Mace huffed. Because our side cannot win anymore. We have no one who could be king. Garland said. And what of the Riverlands? Is there any news? Olenna said. Willers shook his head. Our spies have gone quiet. From Stony September to Maidenpool, there is only silence. The last news was Robb Stark's return to Riverrun, and that the young wolf plans to force Tywin Lannister into a great battle. Although there are stories, that the old gods have granted Jon Snow powers. That he has the green sight, and can see things yet to come. More sorcery. The North and their blasted trees and wild beasts, Mace Tyrell scoffed. The Stark boy is too eager for battle. Lord Tywin is my equal in war. He will not be easily bested. We have to meet with Lord Baelish. Stannis Baratheon is entirely unsuitable for many reasons, not the least of which the man has the personality of a lobster. Olenna said. Baelor Hightower sought me out yesterday. Many at the Starry September are angered by the desecration of septs in the Riverlands. Sir Baelor says that if the Iron Throne does nothing, the swords and the stars may rise again to protect the faith. Garland said. But what does that all mean? And who do they blame for it? Margaery said. They should blame Tywin Lannister for the mountain and his sellswords. But he is too powerful to attack, so we do not know. The game is getting more dangerous. Garland said. Why not just wait for the victor? Stay at Highgarden and keep our forces at home. Willers said. Olenna scoffed. The cow has already been milked and the cream cannot be squirted back. We have declared against the Iron Throne. If the Lannisters win, they may strip us of some lands. If Stannis wins, House Tyrell will be attainted. What if the wolves win? Garland asked. Then we will plan for that too. Olenna said. Petyr Baelish ignored the prissy Lord Caswell and made a straight line to the Tyrells. He had waited at the Unlucky Hog for days, and was eager to make the offer. Like many clever boys, he disliked being in the dark, and his men in King's Landing had sent no news of the Northmen. Ah, Lady Olenna, I rejoice to see you well. I thank House Tyrell for meeting me. Baelish said. Enough empty words. If I need a fool, I would call Butterbumps. What is the Iron Throne offering? Olenna said. Tyrell guards were posted on all sides of the room. Willers and Garland stood near their father. Mace Tyrell sat on an elevated chair, looking to all like a fat green flower tied to a stake. The Queen of Thorns drank tea in the corner with Margaery and Aelary by her side. Loras was dressed in the armor and cloak of the Rainbow Guard. An alliance, of course. A dream of spring and not bloody war in the Riverlands. A betrothal between King Joffrey and the Rose of Highgarden. Baelish said. My sister has a husband. Willers said coolly. Yes, but at King's Landing, we hear that Renly is hurt and might not wake. And even if he did, would he be capable of giving your sister children? Baelish said. King Renly died last evening. Garland said. The eyes of the room were on Littlefinger. He clutched his hands to the plum velvet doublet in shock. I am sorry for your loss. I know he rose against the Iron Throne, but I was his friend in happier days. Loras snorted. You lie. Renly did not like you at all. He named you a whoremonger. The mockingbird showed no anger in the plastered smile. I do not deny who I am. It saddens me to hear of Renly's dislike, but it does not change the terms. I can offer a king in marriage, and that Tyrell blood will hold the Iron Throne. Surely that is what you want for Lady Margaery. And what will it cost us? Olenna said. The swords of the Reach. You would defend the honor of the new queen. And, Stannis is an enemy of the crown, and Renly would get justice at your hands. Baelish said. And what of this Joffrey who claims to be a stag and looks so much like a lion? Olenna said. Joffrey is a good king, noble and true. Baelish said. Do good kings order their betrothed stripped and beaten in front of the court? Olenna said. Lies spread by his enemies. Baelish said smoothly. Lord Baelish, that is what your gold cloaks say at the inn. That Joffrey is a spoiled brat prone to anger. And that he is cruel and reckless. Willers said. I never said he was perfect. Baelish said. Surely there is some way to settle this. Perhaps, a seat on the small council or lands. We would need more than one seat on the council before I give up my beloved daughter. Mace declared. He shut up after a furious glare from Olenna. We will need time to consider. But there is one more thing House Tyrell requires. Lady Olenna said. Sansa Stark. Sansa Stark stared over Aegon's high hill from her room at the Tower of the Hand. She had been stuck here for 2 weeks, although she was not truly a prisoner. She had 2 airy rooms, and servants. She had a writing table in the small hall, a room that could seat 200, where she could read or play the harp. There was no point in writing. The Lannisters would never allow a raven to be sent to her brother and mother. That morning, Sansa had woken, and after taking breakfast alone, sat by the large barred window to knit. She knit the same pattern with the same wool and the same needles, a grey dire wolf with soft yellow eyes. Lady was the smallest of the litter, dainty and trusting, so much that she had not expected the killing stroke by Lord Stark. Every day, Sansa knit a banner of Lady, and every night, she tore the threads out. Her sweet wolf, lost forever from her own lies. The great wooden door opened and Tyrion Lannister stormed in. His squire followed and the black-haired sellsword brought a large group of guards. Several mountain clansmen poured into the small hall, shouting questions and demanding answers. The chieftains of the clans shouted louder, and with a menacing set of gestures, forced their men out of the room. Wine, Pardrick. The best bottle. We should drink everything we can. Tyrion said and sat down. The quiet boy rushed off and brought back a bottle of Arbor Gold. Tyrion poured the wine out into 3 silver goblets. She declined the offer. Sansa curtsied slightly. My lord Hand. Has something happened? You should tell her, dwarf. Everyone will find out soon enough. The sellsword said. Tyrion gulped down his glass, and then took a large swig from Sansa's goblet. This morning, a begging brother started to preach on Cobbler's Square. He said that King's Landing was doomed and that the filth of the city would be purged by fire. But beggars have said many things like that before. Sansa said. Yes, King's Landing is full of the criminally insane. But the preacher claims that his brothers and sisters in the faith saw the carnage in the Riverlands. That the Starks crushed the Lannister army and drove Lord Tywin from that field. Tyrion guzzled down more wine. But how do you know if this is true? Sansa asked. We don't. But the rumors continue. They say that Snow massacred the Lannister knights at the Red Fork. That he conjured an army of wolves and ravens, which devoured men alive. That he can walk into wolves and birds, and took no prisoners. The tales spread through every pot shop, winesome and ale house in the city. Tyrion said with disgust. Our maesters have sent ravens to Antlers, Maidenpool, and Harrenhal, but there is no response. People worry, that this Snow may command the ravens to answer only to him. Pardrick squeaked. Of course there is no response. Maidenpool is 200 miles. A raven will not fly there and return until nightfall. We do not know if the Lannister army has been beaten. Tyrion snapped and then guzzled more wine. You don't believe that, dwarf. These stories have too much detail. They claim that Jon Snow built a wall that could not be broken. And that Robb Stark would have killed your father on the field had it not been for the mountain. Sellswords know when men lose battles. If your father won, he would send a raven, announcing the victory. Bronn said. Tyrion poured another hefty slug of Arbor Gold and downed it. It was not yet noon, but half the bottle was gone. Should he drink this much? Sansa asked. In the shock of the news, she had forgotten her lady's courtesies. Bronn shrugged. He thinks better when he is drunk. We need all the thinking we can get. The Northmen are still over 200 miles away. My father will have left a garrison at Harrenhal. That castle needs to be taken. And if the Starks march to Maidenpool and down to Duskendale, he may regroup his forces and ambush them there. Tyrion said. Either that wine is shit or you need a lot more. If Tywin retreats to Harrenhal, we are fucked. The Starks will just surround the castle and then send men down the King's Road. If this Jon Snow can summon ravens, there is no chance in hell your father can ambush him in the open field. The wolves beat him with his full army. Bronn said. Yes, but perhaps that will delay them. Lady Sansa, you know your brothers. Are they likely to charge down immediately to King's Landing? Tyrion asked. Sansa wiped any emotion from her face, wary of Lannister tricks. My brothers are traitors. My father and mother are traitors. I am loyal to my beloved Joffrey. She said. Lady Sansa, you do not need to hide. We know who you wish to win. Tyrion said gently. She refused to answer. They could beat her, but it would not be for something she said. She kept her hands over her knitting and hid the image of Lady. The great doors to the small hall